Hey guys, tonight we're burrowing back in time, literally. Imagine this. You're somewhere on the American frontier in the 1800s, late fall creeping into early winter, and you've just crossed hundreds of miles in a rickety wagon. Your oxen are tired. Your kids are hungry. You're trying to be brave. But here's the kicker. You're not in some warm cabin with a roaring fire. Nope. You're staring out over an endless flat prairie or a rugged rocky hillside, and you're painfully aware that there are no towns, no sawmills, and absolutely no ready-made shelter in sight. And the cold? It's coming. It's not that cute snowflake kind of cold. It's the kind that burns your lungs when you breathe and turns your fingertips stiff within minutes. So, yeah, you probably won't survive this. Before we hunker down and figure out how to not die in a frozen dirt cave, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I put a lot into these sleepy little survival sagas. Also, where are you watching from tonight? And what time is it? Drop your city and local time in the comments just for fun. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step down from the wagon and crunch onto half-frozen grass. You can smell the dried animal dung, buffalo or cattle, carried on the wind, and your boots sink slightly into the topsoil, soft from recent snowmelt. Your family stares at you. There are 6 of you, and there's nothing resembling a house for at least 100 miles in any direction. You're already too far from the last settlement to go back. You've crossed rivers, mountains and plains to stake your claim out here, and you weren't the first. Others had made it. But right now, none of that is reassuring. The first snow could come tomorrow. So what now? The answer is hiding in plain sight, or rather just beneath your feet. You'll have to dig. That's it. Dig, and fast. The very same prairie sod that's crumbling under your boots might just be your salvation. You think about the stories other pioneers told around fires or in hushed whispers over camp trails, about people who dug into the ground and made little homes, almost like animals. Dugouts. Not glamorous, not spacious, but warmish. Insulated by the very earth that would kill you if you stayed above it. Your first thought is, that sounds like desperation. Your second thought is, I'm desperate. So you get to work. Or, more honestly, you and your family get to work while the sun still offers some warmth. Your hands aren't exactly trembling from frostbite, yet, but you know that will change. The earth is stubborn, clay-thick, half-frozen already in places. You've got a shovel, a pickaxe, maybe a spade, and not much else. Your fingers ache. You curse under your breath because this isn't what you envisioned when you dreamed of owning land. There's no blueprint. There's just trial, error, and sheer will. By sunset, you've managed to scrape out a shallow pit, maybe 4 feet down and 8 feet across. The plan is to go deeper, then widen it. You pick a spot near a rise, something with natural drainage. A slight incline can be the difference between waking up warm or drowned by snowmelt. That's something no one tells you in those romantic pioneer pamphlets. Around you, the prairie glows orange as the sun drops lower. Coyotes yip in the distance. One of the oxen lets out a weary, mournful bellow. The kids are curled up in a pile of quilts, under the wagon, which now acts as the only semblance of shelter you've got. You start to wonder how the heck you ended up out here. Was it hope? Stubbornness? A promise of land and freedom that conveniently left out the part where you might freeze to death in a dirt hole? Still, you keep digging. Because that's what everyone else did. You think of the Swedes and Norwegians who moved west and practically invented the sod house on the plains. Some of them didn't even bother with wood. They stacked layers of sod, those thick, root-tangled clumps of earth, into walls that were surprisingly effective against wind and snow. Others went deeper, straight into hillsides, like prairie dogs, hiding from predators. Only their predators were hypothermia and starvation. Here's something weird. Archaeologists later discovered dugout homes so well hidden, they weren't found again for over 100 years. In some places they were mistaken for ancient caves. One even had shelves made from stacked books, frozen in place like eerie time capsules. One theory? The people who lived in them never left, or they left in a hurry. Maybe the winter got to them before spring did. Or maybe they just wanted to forget what they had to do to survive. You take a break and lean on the shovel. Your muscles are screaming. But as the wind picks up, you feel a bit of hope. The walls you've started digging already cut the wind in half. Down in the pit, it's quieter, warmer, less exposed. It's not a home. Not yet. But it might be one, if you live long enough to finish it. In the end, that's the theme here. You're not building a mansion. You're building a tomb you hope not to die in. Cheerful, huh? But here's the comforting part. Many did survive. The dugouts, the soddies, the root cellars converted into homes. They weren't just temporary fixes. For some settlers, they lasted through multiple winters. Some even stayed in them for decades, adding improvements bit by bit. Chimneys, wooden doors, glass panes scavenged from broken wagons. One pioneer carved their family's initials into the doorway beam, still visible today. Still, scholars argue over whether this method of survival was strategic brilliance or just chaotic desperation. Some say it's proof of human resilience, others call it an act of sheer madness, like digging your own grave and deciding to live in it either way it worked. Sometimes, you stare up at the darkening sky, smoke from your campfire curling into the first stars. Tomorrow, you'll finish the hole. Maybe rig up a roof, maybe figure out how to build a fireplace that doesn't choke you in your sleep. But for tonight, you sleep beside it, not in it. Your hands are cracked, your back sore, and your breath is visible in the cold night air. But you've begun. You've dug in. Morning hits before you're ready. Not that you slept much. The cold has a way of slipping into every fold of fabric and curling up beside your spine like an unwanted guest. You woke up 5 or 6 times, each time half convinced your toes had frozen off. Your breath made little clouds under the wagon, and the oxen shuffled in their sleep, sending waves of frost-shimmered dirt down from their hooves. But now the sun's inching over the edge of the prairie, and the air's full of that pale, biting light that offers no warmth, just the illusion of it. Today, you dig or you die. It's that simple. You don't get to sit around dreaming about perfect homes with wood panelling and lace curtains. Right now, your dream home is a 6x8 pit that won't collapse on your head, or fill with water the first time it snows, so you stretch your sore arms, shake out your fingers, and go back to work before your body starts protesting too loudly. You've got a good start from yesterday. The hole is maybe waist deep now, but that's not deep enough. Not yet. You glance over at the others, your partner, already stoking a low fire, the kids still bundled up and not yet whining. You know you've got a few hours of good light before the weather turns, so you pick up the shovel, which is already blunted at the edges, and you start slicing into the earth. Digging into cold ground isn't just hard, it's a conversation with the land. The soil changes as you go down. Near the surface, it's soft, cracked, dry, a little forgiving. But then you hit the denser stuff. Clay, roots, patches of half-frozen grit that feel like rock. Every foot you go down makes your back scream louder. And let's not even talk about the blisters forming on your hands. You were told this would be hard. No one told you it would feel like tunneling into your own grave with a soup spoon. Still, you keep at it, because you've seen what happens when people don't. You remember the stories. Settlers frozen in their wagons, families who built fires inside canvas tents and never woke up, children buried in snowdrifts. This land doesn't care about you. The only way to survive it is to out-stubborn it. By noon, you've carved out a squarish chamber nearly 6 feet deep. It's not pretty. The walls are uneven, bits of sod still clinging in patches, roots hanging like forgotten cords. But it's deep enough now that, when you step into it, the wind is almost completely blocked. It's a strange silence, one that hums in your ears like you've stepped into another world, the kind of quiet that feels ancient. And that's when you start to understand something odd, something fringe. For all the ruggedness and brutality of what you're doing, it's not new humans have been living underground for centuries. From the cave dwellers of Cappadocia to medieval cellars in Eastern Europe, people have always turned to the earth when there was nowhere else to go. You're not inventing something, you're remembering it, instinctively. Some historians believe this instinct to burrow comes from deep ancestral memory, that we're hardwired, like animals, to seek the protection of the earth when we're threatened. Others say it's just pragmatism. You go underground because it's the only insulation you can afford. Either way, there's something deeply human about crouching inside a space you carved with your own hands. You take a break and sip some water that tastes faintly of tin. You didn't bring much, and the next creek is frozen over, but it's enough to keep you going for now. You chew a strip of jerky, stare at your not quite home, and start planning the next steps. You'll need shelves, small ones, maybe made from flat stones or scrap wood. A fire pit, obviously, though building that without proper bricks is going to be a nightmare. And most of all, you need a roof. That part will be tricky. You have some lumber, but not much, and using the wagon boards would leave you exposed if you need to move again. Some pioneers used branches, woven tightly and stacked like a poor man's thatch. Others went full flintstones and layered sod right on top, thick, heavy and prone to collapse if you weren't careful. That's the catch with underground shelters. They're safe until they're not. Get the roof wrong and it caves in. Dig too shallow and the wind finds you. Go too deep without drainage and you're sleeping in a swamp. Every decision matters. Every inch is survival math. As you start measuring out the entrance, something angled, maybe south-facing to catch the sun, you hear the wind pick up again. A sharp, low whistle that cuts across the plains like a warning. You don't need anyone to tell you. Another storm is coming. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. You can feel it in your teeth. The air carries a kind of cold that isn't just temperature. It's pressure heaviness. You've got days at most to finish this place before snow buries everything. Your partner joins you, dragging what's left of the kindling. They step down into the dugout and blink, impressed. Doesn't feel like a coffin, they say, and that's probably the highest praise you'll get out here. You manage a tired smile. Together you run your hands along the walls, patting them down, feeling the temperature difference. Even now, with wind biting at the edges, it's at least 20 degrees warmer down here. That's not comfort. That's survival. One quirky thing you've noticed, something you didn't expect, is how the dugout muffles sound. Even voices echo differently, like the earth is listening in. It's almost eerie. Some settlers swore their underground shelters whispered back to them. Others chalked it up to exhaustion, isolation, or maybe just the wind threading through the cracks at night. Either way, it makes the place feel more alive than you're comfortable with. By evening, the pit is ready for its lid. You're not done, not even close, but the hardest part is over. You have a space, a plan, and the stubborn determination to see it through tomorrow. You'll start the roof. After that, a chimney if you're lucky, a sleeping platform to get you off the damp floor, maybe even a shelf for the little things that make life feel like something more than just not dying. You climb out of the hole one last time as the sun sets, casting your little excavation in a warm orange glow. It's not much, but it's more than you had yesterday and tonight. When the cold comes crawling back, you'll have a place to hide from it, at least for a while. You wake up to frost clinging to your eyelashes and the taste of smoke still clinging to the roof of your mouth. You must have fallen asleep beside the campfire, its embers now cold and grey like a forgotten memory. The prairie is wrapped in silence. Even the oxen are quiet this morning, their breath fogging in thick clouds as they huddle together. There's a weight to the air, a kind of stillness that makes you look up and check the sky. And there it is. Low, heavy clouds, bloated and grey, crawling toward you from the north. Snow's coming. Not the playful, picturesque kind you might remember from childhood. This is frontier snow. Relentless. Blinding. The sort that shows up, overstays its welcome, and buries everything that wasn't prepared. You've got maybe 24 hours, less if the wind picks up time to stop digging and start building up. You glance over at the pit you carved, your future underground shelter, and squint. It's not enough anymore, not just depth, not just shape. You need to finish it, seal it, and get under something solid before the first flakes fall, and that means building a roof. A real one. But what's your model for this? You've never built anything heavier than a chicken coop back home, and that was on a dare. You didn't come here to be an architect, you came to start a life. Now you have to do both. Luckily, you remember a story someone told back in the last settlement. An odd one, but it stuck with you. A group of settlers out near Nebraska watched prairie dogs in the winter. Seriously. Little animals, barely a foot tall, yet they survived the same brutal weather that turned wagons into frozen tombs. So they watched, closely. Prairie dogs didn't just dig holes, they engineered airflow, drainage, angled entrances. Their tunnels curved upward at just the right angle to block water, but still allow breathing in their mounds. Elevated chimneys to keep snow from plugging the exits. That's the blueprint. You laugh a little, imagining yourself as a 6-foot prairie dog, but the logic holds. You start gathering what little timber you have, broken fence rails, a few beams from a busted crate. You even sacrifice the handle from your handcart. It'll be part of the support frame now. Every stick counts. It's not going to be pretty, but it doesn't need to be. It just needs to hold. Laying the support beams across the dugout is easier said than done. You wedge them into the walls at opposite ends, trying to make sure they don't shift or sink. Some settlers used willow branches, others pine saplings, depending on what the land offered. You're working with the leftovers of a freight wagon and hope. Once you have your skeleton in place, it's time to layer the covering. Here's the trick they don't tell you. Dirt is heavy, like back-breaking heavy. You can't just throw mud on top and expect it to stay. You need brush sod, something to cradle the soil and spread the weight. So you strip grass in thick, root-packed mats. It takes hours. Each clump is like lifting a slab of meat, wet, tangled, and far too alive. You stack them, roots up, across the roof frame like shingles. Then come the dirt and stones, slowly, carefully. You tamp it all down with the back of the shovel, crawling on your hands and knees, praying you don't fall through. By the time you finish, your arms are trembling. The roof's not elegant, it's lumpy, sloped unevenly, patched with every last scrap of material you could find, but it holds you test it. Sit on it. Listen for creaks. Nothing. That's either a very good sign or a very bad one, and you're too tired to care which. One quirky little moment hits you as you back away to admire your work. A family of field mice scurries over the hill beside your dugout, completely uninterested in your masterpiece. They dive into a hole no wider than your wrist and vanish like magic. You stare for a second and mutter, "Show-offs." You move on to the entrance. This part is crucial. A bad entrance turns your shelter into a wind tunnel, so you dig a trench, just deep enough to walk through hunched, and angle it downward, toward your main chamber. You want the doorway lower than the living space to stop water and snow from flowing in. The ideal setup? A Z-shaped entrance with a flap of heavy fabric or animal hide. Of course, you don't have that. So you improvise with an old canvas tarp and a lot of wishful thinking. Now for airflow, you remember the prairie dogs again. Settlers used to build 2 holes, one for going in and out, the other for smoke and ventilation. You're not fancy enough for a second chimney, but you do carve a narrow shaft through the back wall and up through the roof, something that can act as a crude vent. You cap it with a ring of stones and an old skillet lid to keep the snow out. And finally, you crawl inside. It's barely tall enough to sit up in. Your head brushes the roof, your back touches the wall. It smells like wet clay and sweat, but it's quiet still, almost warm. You light a small candle stub and place it in a little indentation in the wall. The flicker dances across the space, revealing the rough-hewn walls, the packed dirt floor, and your partner peering in with an expression equal parts horror and amazement. "Home sweet hole," you say, voice scratchy. There's laughter, real, tired laughter, and for a second things don't feel so bad. Scholars later argued about whether dugouts like this were actually safe. Some claimed they were more dangerous than they looked, prone to carbon monoxide poisoning, collapse, rot. Others insisted they were architectural marvels of necessity, especially in areas with no timber. One debate even centred on whether the mental strain of living underground caused more damage than the cold ever could. Could you spend weeks without daylight and stay sane? But in the moment, none of that matters. You're in, out of the wind, below the frost line, and for the first time in days you have a barrier between you and the brutal, uncaring sky. Outside, the first snowflakes drift down, thin at first like ash, then thicker, heavy. You hear them hit the tarp above the doorway with soft thuds. You settle into your dirt-walled bunker, pull a blanket around your shoulders and listen. For now, you've won. Morning doesn't arrive so much as it sneaks in. The only clue that a new day has begun is the faint grey light pushing through the smoke hole. Filtered and cold, no rooster crows, no sunshine beams through windows, just you, blinking in a tight earthen room that smells like damp wool and smoke, with the ceiling close enough to slap if you had the energy. You're alive, that's the win, your shelter held. Through the night, snow fell hard, thick enough to bury the wagon's wheels and smooth the landscape into a white, endless hush. But inside your dugout, still above freezing, a small miracle. The walls did their job, and the roof, wobbly, sad-looking thing that it is, didn't cave in. Not even under the weight of a foot of fresh snow. You almost want to name it. You sit up slowly, feeling every muscle argue. Your shoulders feel like they've been kneaded by a particularly angry horse. The ground beneath your bedroll is stiff, cold, and unyielding. But hey, it's better than open prairie. You run a hand along the wall beside you. The clay is firm and cool, faintly textured and surprisingly dry. You built this, with your hands, in less than 3 days, out of sheer panic and necessity. Time to inventory what you've got left. A partial sack of flour, 2 onions, a tin of lard, enough jerky to make a dog cry, no fresh water unless you melt snow, a candle stub with barely any wick left, 2 matches. One ox looks like he's thinking about retirement permanently, but you've still got your shovel, your fire starter, your shelter. Now comes the part no one romanticizes, the daily maintenance of not freezing to death. First order of business, fire. Last night's embers are cold, but you'd prepped a bit. You stacked a few sticks under a stone lip near the centre of the dugout floor, a crude hearth. You're starting to figure out how to keep smoke from suffocating you, mostly by trial and error. You crack open the smoke hole and wave your hand through it to check for airflow. It's pulling just enough. With fingers still stiff, you build a tiny teepee of kindling, lay in a dried pine cone and strike one of your matches. The spark catches flame blooms. It feels like lighting a tiny sun. The warmth spreads slowly, lazily, like a dog stretching after sleep. In the dim flicker, your shelter looks almost cozy, almost. Outside, it's a different story. You crawl up the entrance tunnel, brush aside the canvas tarp, and peek out into a world of white silence. The snow muffles everything. No wind, no birds, just the sound of your own breath, and the gentle, unsettling crunch of your boots in powder as you test the area. And now the grim part hits. How long will this snow last? How many days trapped in that hole before you start naming the dirt clumps on the wall? A lot of early settlers couldn't make it through their first winter because they underestimated just how long it would stretch. Weeks of snow. No roads, no help. Just you, your food stash, and a whole lot of nothing. You start gathering snow into a pot. It's going to be your water for the next few days. You melt it slowly back inside, over your fragile fire, and it hisses as it turns from solid to steam to warm liquid. You pour it into a tin mug and hold it like it's a rare delicacy. It tastes like iron and air and survival. Not quite coffee, but your brain doesn't care. Later that morning you sit near the fire with your back to the wall, carving a chunk of dry wood into something vaguely useful. You're not a whittler by trade, but idle hands are dangerous hands when you're stuck underground. You try to make a spoon. It ends up looking like a deranged question mark. Still, better than sticking your fingers into hot porridge, which might be dinner tonight if you're lucky. And speaking of porridge, you pull together your sad collection of ingredients. A pinch of flour, some melted snow and a dab of lard go into your battered pot. You stir over the fire with the back end of your knife, which is exactly as sketchy as it sounds. But eventually it thickens. The smell isn't good, but it isn't bad either. Just neutral. Settler flavoured. A pioneer classic. You eat slowly, feeling the warmth spread from your stomach outward. For the first time in days, you're not in motion. You're still, waiting. And that's a dangerous shift. You start noticing things, like how the corner where you sleep is a bit damper than the rest, or how the ceiling's sagging just a tiny bit more than it did last night. You hear the wind starting again outside, gently at first, then louder, scraping across the snowpack above you. And then something happens you didn't plan for: boredom. Turns out, once you're no longer actively freezing, you have time to think, time to worry, time to realise how claustrophobic it really is in here. You start noticing every creak of the roof, every whisper of dirt settling behind your ear. One pioneer's journal described it as living inside a grave and daring it to close in on you. Sounds dramatic, until you feel it too. There's a reason some people swore these shelters were cursed. One couple, according to a fringy little oral account passed down in Kansas, claimed their dugouts sang to them at night. Soft, eerie harmonies coming through the smoke hole. They said it was just the wind, or maybe the snow shifting. But after a few weeks, they were convinced the house was trying to keep them there. They moved out the second the thaw hit, never looked back. Some say they moved into town. Others say they walked into the prairie one morning and never came back. Scholars laugh at those stories, of course. They say it's cabin fever, hypothermia, isolation. But still, you hear enough wind moan through a hole in the ceiling in the dark, you might start hearing voices too. You shake off the weirdness and focus on tasks. You reinforce the walls with more packed mud, rearrange the firestones, mark the days on a scrap of wood. You do what people always do when there's nothing left to do. You make routines. Wake up, stoke the fire, melt snow, Fix a leak, carve a spoon. Try not to think too hard. Try not to listen too closely when the wind changes pitch. Night comes fast in winter. You didn't see the sun, but the light fades all the same. You feed the last scraps of kindling into the fire, wrap yourself in a blanket and lie down on your scratchy bedroll. The earth breathes around you, quiet, slow and constant. You close your eyes and you wait. The next morning begins without sunlight. Again. But that's the routine now. You wake in muted greyness, the kind that feels like the world forgot how to turn on its lights. Your breath is visible, even with the fire smouldering, and the walls feel a little closer than they did yesterday. It's quiet outside. Too quiet. That heavy, smothered kind of silence that means snow's still falling, slow and thick. You're buried a little deeper today. You press your palm against the earthen wall, still solid. No water seeping through. A good sign. You climb the tunnel and push at the tarp covering the entrance. It resists at first, then gives way with a wet crackle. A foot of new snow collapses inward. You push it aside with a grunt and poke your head into the winter morning. It's a white void. The world has been erased. No horizon, no sun, just the shifting texture of snow and sky, and the muffled sounds of your own breathing. It makes you feel small, in a way that's not entirely unpleasant, just humbling, like you're an ant under glass. You go back down into the dugout, shaking snow from your shoulders and hair. You light the fire again, careful to conserve your kindling. The pile's low, too low. You'll need more soon. That means going outside, braving the white. You sigh. Because of course it does. That's the reality now. Everything comes at a cost, even warmth. After a slow, gritty breakfast, melted snow and the last pinch of cornmeal, you gear up. Coat, scarf, extra socks layered inside worn boots. The cold hits you like a slap when you emerge. It's not angry, just sharp. A quiet predator. You walk a short loop around your shelter, checking for structural damage the roof's holding. A little sag near the centre, but nothing urgent. You grab your axe and head toward a patch of brush you noticed before the snow fell. With luck, something there didn't get completely buried. As you wade through the drifts, you start thinking about soil. More specifically, how the type of ground you've chosen has been both a blessing and a curse. You didn't think about it at first. You just picked a spot and dug. But now you're learning. Fast. Loamy soil, rich with organic material, is a dream to dig but a nightmare when it rains. Sandy soil drains well, but your walls collapse if you so much as look at them sideways. And clay's a strange beast, hard as stone in the cold, sticky and impossible when wet. But if you're lucky, you get a mix, what early homesteaders called prairie gold, firm enough to hold shape, porous enough to breathe. You figure your current shelter is somewhere between loam and clay. That explains why the smoke hole isn't dripping yet, and why the walls haven't started crumbling, but you've seen others fail. On the trail west, there was that family from Indiana. They'd built their dugout in sandy ground near a dry creek bed. Looked fine at first, until the first thaw came. The walls gave out in the middle of the night. Their shelter turned into a mudslide. They were lucky to escape with their boots. You find the brush pile under a drift, thankfully not frozen solid. The twigs snap easily, and you fill your arms with as much as you can carry. It's not enough, but it's a start. As you walk back, you catch sight of your own tracks from yesterday, already softened by fresh snow, like time trying to erase you. Back inside, the dugout feels warmer now. That might be your body playing tricks on you, but you'll take it. You lay the new kindling near the hearth to dry. It smells like sap and frost, clean, earthy. You think about collecting more later, maybe even digging a small trench near the entrance to store emergency firewood. If the snow gets worse, you won't be able to forage every day. Settlers used to call this the second build. The first build is the panic shelter. Just dig fast, roof it, survive. The second build is when you start thinking like someone who plans to stay alive long enough to regret it. You reinforce walls, add shelves, carve out niches for storage. One woman you met weeks back said she used hollow gourds as canteens, sealing them with wax and hiding them in the walls of her shelter. Clever. If you ever find a gourd again, you'll steal the idea. As the fire catches, you sit back against the dirt wall and let yourself breathe for a moment. The dugout is ugly, cramped, damp in spots, but it's yours. And in some bizarre way, it's starting to feel like a place. like something more than a panic cave. You even start to notice the little details, the faint layers in the soil like pages in a book, tiny insect tunnels fossilized in the clay, the way the firelight plays against the craggy surface. It's not beautiful, but it's real. And just when you start to think you're adjusting, you hear something. A groan. It's deep, low, and comes from overhead. You freeze, then listen harder. Nothing, just wind. But for a second it felt like the roof shifted, like the earth settled a little too much. You check the support beams, still solid. No fresh cracks, no leaks. Probably just snow sliding off. Probably. Still, you can't help but think of the stories, the fringe ones. There's an old account buried in a memoir you found once, about a trapper in Montana who swore his dugout tried to sink him back into the ground. The man was convinced the earth was alive watching, judging. He slept sitting up for weeks, eventually moved into a canvas tent just to get away from it. Froze to death, ironically. Scholars? They dismiss it. Classic frontier madness. Isolation plays tricks on the brain, but part of you gets it. When you live inside the earth, your senses go funny. Every sound becomes suspect. Every creak is a threat. You start to feel like you're squatting inside something ancient that tolerates you. Barely. You shake the thoughts off. Check the fire. Stir the embers. The glow steadies your nerves. You pile more kindling on. The flames snap and hiss like they're telling jokes you're not smart enough to understand. You let them talk. Then slowly you stretch out on your bedroll. Pull your blanket over your shoulders. Let your body sink into the uneven, frozen floor. Outside, the snow keeps falling. Inside, the earth holds, for now. You're starting to lose track of how many days it's been. Time is a flat, frozen circle now. Light fades in, fades out, and all of it happens through a haze of smoke, snow, and the dull ache in your lower back. There's no calendar on the wall of your underground hideaway, no ticking clock, just your internal rhythm, which by now beats to the pace of firewood use and how long it takes a pot of snow to melt over embers. Today begins like the rest. Quietly. Too quietly. You wake to an odd stillness that's different from the usual hush, the kind that makes your skin crawl a little. A quick check outside confirms it. A fresh layer of snow, maybe 6 inches, smooth as icing on a cake. No wind, no movement, just a landscape blanketed in eerie calm. But it's not the snow that sets you on edge. It's the air. There's a wetness in it today. A subtle softness to the cold that feels wrong. You look up toward the clouds and realize what it means. A thaw. That soft, deceptive warmth that pioneers learn to dread. It tricks you into thinking the worst is over. But often it's the beginning of a different kind of trouble, because when the snow melts and the air turns wet, your carefully dug hole in the earth can suddenly become a bathtub. Or worse, a grave. Back inside, you eye your walls suspiciously. They seem fine, but you know better. One good soak and they could turn to sludge. You start clearing drainage channels outside, little ditches sloped away from the entrance. You do it fast, breath huffing in clouds, body half frozen and half panicked. You've heard stories. One family, up near the Dakota border, was found drowned in their own dugout, when a sudden melt funneled water straight through their entrance tunnel. They never even made it to the door. You dig deeper, pack snow along the sides of the channel, to form makeshift walls. Your fingers sting from the wet. You scoop out slushy ice with a tin cup and toss it as far away as you can. It's messy, miserable work, and it's not even guaranteed to help. That's the curse of elevation on the frontier. Pick the wrong slope, and you might as well be living in a puddle. Pioneers who built into hillsides had better luck water ran off. Heat stayed in. But if you built on the flat, and the ground underneath turned to sponge, it didn't matter how nice your roof was. It was game over. You start to think back to when you chose this spot. It seemed good. A little rise. Not quite a hill, but higher than the wagon tracks. Still, maybe not high enough. You trudge back inside, boots soaked, coat heavy with meltwater. You hang everything by the fire, watching the steam rise off it in ghostly curls. The inside of your shelter is still dry. Mostly. A few darker patches near the floor, but not spreading. Yet. You breathe out slowly and lean against the wall, feeling the cold clay beneath your palm. It's strange. How quickly the earth becomes familiar when it's your roof, your walls, your protection. You start to learn its moods. The way it settles after a cold night, the slight shift in smell when it's about to rain or snow, and now the dampness that creeps in slow and insidious like doubt. You make a plan, reinforce the floor. If water's coming, you need to be off the ground. So you begin layering brush and sticks, anything to act as insulation. Some settlers swore by planks or crates if they had them. You don't. Just branches and frozen straw you saved from the oxen's last meal. It's not much, but it's better than lying in cold mud. The day drags on in a kind of wet limbo. You check the smoke hole for drips. You run your hand along the walls. You melt more snow, eat the last of your salted pork. Every now and then, you hear the slow drip of meltwater outside, like a faucet somewhere in the sky just turned on. Evening comes without warning. The light fades fast, swallowed by thick cloud cover. You build your fire higher than usual, even though it burns more fuel. You want heat, dryness, safety, just for tonight. You huddle near the flames, thinking of those who did this before you, who lived this exact scenario 100 years ago. Some of them were more than just settlers. They were engineers, builders, inventors of necessity. You remember reading about the soddy builders of Kansas. One man built an underground room so well insulated that even in February he could store water in ceramic jugs without them freezing. Others lined their walls with flattened tin cans or strips of bark to redirect moisture. One particularly weird trick, lining the inside of the dugout with newspapers, layers and layers of them, glued to the walls with flour paste, forming a kind of makeshift insulation, kept the heat in, kept the walls dry. Also made for interesting bedtime reading when the firelight hit just right. You wish you had a stack of those now, even if the stories were 6 months old. You listen, always listening, for drips, for shifts, for that low creak of the earth relaxing or plotting. Nothing so far. The structure's holding. The fire crackles. Your body aches in familiar ways, but you're still here, still underground, still breathing. There's something a little mythic about it all. Like you've turned into a creature of the soil, one of those old folktale hermits who live in the hills and emerge only once a year to trade stories and tobacco. Your fingernails are permanently rimmed with dirt. Your hair smells like wood smoke. You haven't seen your reflection in days. And honestly, if you did, it'd probably try to crawl back into the mirror and hide. Before bed, you carve a small notch into the wall near the entrance. Day? 5? 6? Hard to say. But you're marking it anyway. If only to remember that time is still passing, that you're still here. Still winning, barely. You lay down, layered in every piece of clothing you own, and close your eyes. Outside, the thaw continues. Water drips, flows, seeks out low places like yours, but your roof holds, your walls stand, and you? You sleep with one ear open, one hand on your boots just in case. Because this house may be underground, but it's still yours to fight for. You're woken not by sound, but by something worse. Cold air licking your face from the entrance tunnel. It's sharp, fresh, and definitely not invited. Your shelter, your damp, dirt-walled haven, is leaking air, and that's never a good sign. The fire's gone out, your breath fogs in front of your nose, and the back of your neck feels like someone dragged an icicle across it in your sleep. You sit up fast, head brushing the roof. The warmth from yesterday's fire is long gone. Whatever thaw had settled over the prairie has reversed itself overnight. You scramble up the tunnel, pushing the canvas flap aside. The wind slams you in the face, snowflakes pelting your eyes like fine gravel. You blink hard. Yep, cold's back. And it brought a friend. A full-on north wind. The kind that flattens brush, scours the land clean, and finds every weakness in a poorly built shelter. You duck back inside, wiping snow from your eyelashes and already cursing the day. Looks like the freeze-thaw game is going to be a regular thing now. Your first thought, the entrance needs help. A lot of it. You sit near the hearth, wrapping your hands around a warm stone you left by the fire the night before. The chill in the air creeps in slow, almost surgical in how it finds your bones. You look toward the tunnel and frown. The way it's currently built, angled and open with nothing but a flap, is a rookie mistake, and now you're paying for it. The old settlers had a trick, a good one. They built their doorways to curve, sometimes even with two bends like the letter Z flattened sideways. Cold air didn't flow easily through turns, and that's what you need now, insulation by geometry. But you didn't dig a curve, you dug a trench, straight and simple. So now it's time to retrofit. You grab your shovel, coat up, and step outside into the wind, the snow bites your skin immediately. You curse under your breath, half from the sting, half from the sheer absurdity of what you're doing. Trying to redesign a tunnel entrance in sub-zero wind with frozen fingers and a shovel that's seen better days, but you do it anyway. You dig out a shallow chamber just in front of the main tunnel, a kind of airlock. You remember reading about it. Double entries. The front fills with snow and cold, but the second chamber blocks it from reaching the interior. Takes hours and most of your energy. You stamp your feet to keep the blood moving. Your breath forms ice in your scarf. Eventually you jam together a wall of snow bricks along one edge, packing them tight, angling them to catch the wind and push it around instead of through. Primitive but functional. You even pile brush against the top to weigh it down. Back inside you feel the difference almost instantly. The wind is quieter. The air is still sharp, but no longer seeping in like it owns the place. You sit near the hearth, relight the fire, and finally let your body rest. You've made your dugout smarter. You've learned. You feel a little like a fox, adapting, adjusting, surviving by design. And that's when it hits you. You've started thinking like the land, not against it, with it. Your first few days were about resistance, trying to hold back the cold, the snow, the dark now. Now you're learning how to use them. You can't stop the wind, but you can make it work around you. You can't prevent the snow, but you can pile it for insulation. You can't make the sun rise faster, but you can build your day around the light you get. You're not beating nature. You're negotiating with it. Your partner joins you near the fire, wrapped in every scrap of wool and flannel they own. They nod toward the entrance, eyebrows raised. "It's better," they say, voice hoarse. "Doesn't feel like we're sleeping in a wind tunnel anymore," you nod. "Still feels like we're sleeping in a grave." They laugh, but it's the tired kind. You both know this isn't sustainable. You need food, wood, water that doesn't come from boiled slush. But at least the dugout, the structure, is holding up. You've made it smarter, stronger, and in this place, that's something. You pull out your carving knife, really just a broken piece of steel ground against a stone, and start working on a door peg, something to hold the tarp tighter. Your hands are clumsy, fingers stiff, but it's work. Work is what keeps you from sitting still too long. Settlers used to say the cold didn't kill you, stillness did. The moment you stopped moving, stopped improving your odds, the cold took its chance. One strange story comes to mind. A German homesteader out near Wyoming supposedly built his entire dugout with a 3-part entrance system. First chamber for gear, second for sleeping, third for livestock. All underground, lived there for 5 winters with barely a scratch. Some say he used straw bale walls inside the entry tunnel to trap heat. Others claimed he packed it with manure, which, as horrible as it sounds, actually generates warmth as it breaks down. Pioneers weren't above survival-grade creativity. Historians still argue whether those methods were genius or just desperate improvisation. But hey, who says it can't be both? As the sun fades, what little of it you get, you secure the new entrance, pile up the snow bricks, and crawl back into the dugout. The fire's holding steady. The space feels protected, less like a hole in the ground and more like a proper den. You even consider digging a side alcove tomorrow, something for storage, maybe a shelf, a cold pit for food. You're starting to think like a person who plans to stay alive. And oddly enough, you're starting to appreciate the logic of this whole underground thing. Above ground is chaos. Wind, snow, visibility gone. But down here is order. Heat rises, cold sinks, walls insulate. The earth holds a steady temperature, not warm but stable. The deeper you go, the more that brutal swing between freezing days and bitter nights softens. It's like tapping into the planet's thermostat. You crawl into your bedding, the fire's warmth brushing your face, and feel a strange sense of pride. You improved the shelter today, solved a problem, beat the wind at its own game. For a moment you even allow yourself the smallest of luxuries, imagining spring, green grass, dry boots, sun on your face. The idea of standing on top of this very spot one day, the dugout collapsed or buried or forgotten, and thinking, I lived down there, and I made it. But that's for later. Tonight you sleep under a snow-covered roof of sticks and dirt with the wind howling just outside, and the knowledge that even in a frozen wasteland, a hole in the ground, built with desperation, sweat, and just enough smarts can be enough. The roof has started talking to you, not in words, thank God, but in creaks, groans. That slow, uneasy shift of packed snow settling on top of wood that was never meant to carry weight. It starts sometime in the early morning, before full light, after your fires burn down to a whispering glow. The sound is faint at first, like an old man clearing his throat politely, but then it gets bolder. A deep crack, almost like a rib shifting. You open your eyes, and for a second you just lie there, staring up at the dark outline of your ceiling. Nothing more than a few branches, bundled brush, and a whole lot of dirt. You don't want to move. If the roof is going to come down, you don't want to be mid-stretch with your mouth open. There's something particularly humiliating about the idea of dying under your own construction, pancaked by your best attempt at engineering. You sit up slowly, listen harder. Another groan, no collapse, just warning shots. You strike the flint and coax the fire back to life. The glow softens the gloom. Everything looks the same. No sagging beams, no cracks along the top edges. Still, that creak's not nothing. Something shifted. Probably just the snow outside melting and refreezing. Still, your stomach tightens. You make breakfast, if you can call it that. The last half-handful of cornmeal, boiled down into a gluey paste that even the ox wouldn't envy, but it's warm. It fills the space in your gut where panic wants to live, and most importantly, it gives you enough energy to face the next job, reinforcing the roof. Now let's talk about how ridiculous the roof is. It's a load-bearing hope sandwich, a thin crust of timber, branches, and packed dirt holding back several thousand pounds of snow and frozen debris. You built it in a panic, dug the shelter in 3 days, laid the brush and branches like you were stacking firewood, then smothered it with sod and prayed. And now that same prayer is bending under the weight of a shifting season. You crawl outside and immediately regret it. The temperature's dropped again, and the wind is clawing at your cheeks like it's trying to peel your skin off. You squint through the white glare of sun on snow. The roof doesn't look too bad, just a little sag near the centre. But you know better than to trust appearances. Snow hides everything. Weakness, cracks, regret. You fetch what wood you have left, mostly sticks, a few planks scavenged from under the wagon, and a piece of fence rail that's been doing nothing but taking up space. Today it earns its keep. You work fast, your breath huffing into the air like steam off a boiling kettle. You pack down more snow over the new supports. Yes, snow, because frozen snow is actually a great insulator. Settlers used to stack it intentionally over their dugouts once the initial freeze hit. A well-packed snow roof could keep the heat in and the wind out better than wood ever could. And anyway, you don't have a better option. While you work, you think about the old designs, the ones that were smarter than yours. Some pioneers didn't build flat roofs like you did. They made domes, arch shapes. It turns out curved lines are stronger than straight ones. The weight distributes better, but curves take time, planning and wood. You don't have flat is faster. Flat is desperate. You finish your patch job and crawl back inside, numb to your elbows and muttering things the local preacher would faint over. The fire greets you like an old friend. You feed it your last dry branch and sit cross-legged beside it, warming your hands and watching the flames as they catch. There's comfort in the firelight. It makes the walls glow in amber and shadow, giving depth to the rough soil, softening the harsh angles. It almost makes the place feel like a home. Almost. You hear another creak above, louder this time, and you freeze, but again, nothing falls. The roof holds, just barely. Like a dog you've trained badly, it obeys, but with attitude. Still, you start mentally preparing a plan B. If the roof collapses, where do you sleep? The wagon? It's buried under a foot of snow and would be colder than a meat locker dig another hole. You barely have the energy to dig through your own thoughts. There's something weirdly human about all this. All through history, people have built just good enough shelters, patched them, propped them, prayed over them, earth homes in Mongolia, pit houses in the Arctic, lava tube dwellings in Iceland, all of them pressed into the land like blisters, trying to stay alive by going low instead of high. There's an odd dignity in that. You think about those people now, not just as historical trivia, but as comrades. They all built roofs just like yours, maybe better, maybe worse. Then there's the fringe theory that some of these early shelters were never meant to be temporary. A few researchers argue that certain pioneer families preferred the dugout long term, even after the first winter. Why? Because they were more comfortable than cabins, better insulated, easier to heat. You think about that. Could you live like this for years? Digging deeper rooms, building out sideways, adding shelves, windows made from glass bottles, maybe even a chimney built from bricks if you could ever afford such a luxury. Maybe if you had to. You spend the rest of the afternoon inside reinforcing the beams with tension sticks, wedged diagonally from the floor to the roof. A bit of a hack, but it works. It takes the weight and spreads it into the side walls. Some early homesteaders used tree forks or even bones for that purpose. Whatever could hold pressure, you're doing it with half a broom handle and part of a yoke. As night comes, the wind kicks up again. You eat what's left of your supplies, scraps of hardtack you thought were mouse-chewed but now seem like delicacies. You even allow yourself a laugh, the kind that sounds more like a cough, and then you lay back, staring at the ceiling again. You wonder if the creaking will ever stop. Maybe not. Maybe it's part of the music of the dugout now, a rhythm to measure your nights by. The roof groans, the fire pops, the wind howls, and you, pressed into the earth, alive in a box of your own making, listen to all of it. Hoping that whatever holds tonight still holds tomorrow, you've become a smoke connoisseur, not in the elegant pipe-smoking by the fireplace sense, but in the very real, very wheezy, am I about to pass out or is this normal sort of way. Your entire day-to-day revolves around smoke, where it goes, where it doesn't, how it behaves when the wind changes, and how to stop it from killing you while you boil a pot of snow and heat something resembling food. The problem starts just after dawn, when you try to start your fire and immediately get a faceful of thick grey smoke that curls around your head and sits there like it paid rent. You wave your arms, you cough, you open the entrance flap. It helps for maybe 30 seconds, and then the smoke comes roaring back, angrier now, thicker, like you insulted its mother. You stamp out the fire before it gasses you. Then you sit back, blinking through the haze and rubbing your eyes until they stop streaming. It's ventilation, or the lack thereof. You knew it was coming. Fire needs air and your underground shelter doesn't have much to spare. It's just basic science. Combustion needs oxygen, and if the air doesn't move, the smoke hangs in the space until it replaces all the breathable air with a choking cloud of regret. You've already got a crude smoke hole punched through the roof, maybe a handspan wide. You thought that would be enough. Turns out, it's not. Maybe it was when the wind blew right, or when the fire was small, but as you burn wetter fuel, frozen wood, pine cones, anything that'll catch, the smoke thickens and refuses to leave. So guess what today's mission is, and you're building a chimney, or at least something that functions like one. You crawl outside where the wind has softened, and the sky's gone a weird milky grey. Snow still blankets everything, but the air feels heavy, moist, like a storm's planning something, but hasn't made up its mind yet. You assess your current chimney. It's not really a chimney at all, just a hole through packed earth, with a few rocks stacked around it to keep snow from falling in. You're going to have to improve that. Make a drawer, get the smoke moving upward instead of sideways, maybe even keep water from dripping in when the snow melts. Easier said than done when your building materials include one busted pot lid, a dented tin can, 6 rocks, and whatever wood you can scrape up, and you get to work improvising as you go. You find a few flatter stones, stack them around the opening in a half circle, then lash them together with frozen twine and pine branches. You stuff mud into the gaps, wet clay from the banks near the shelter. It hardens quickly in the cold, sealing things up better than expected. Still not enough. You remember a trick someone told you during the wagon ride west. Add height. A chimney draws better when it's tall. Even a foot or two helps, so you scavenge what you can. Long branches, a rusted stovepipe section you'd been saving as a cup, and even the curled leg of a broken camp stool. You fit them together, rig a makeshift vertical vent above your existing hole, and tie everything together like a madman's wind chime. It's ridiculous. It looks like a one-person art installation titled Desperation in Winter. But it just might work. Back inside, you relight your fire. This time you wait. Watch. The smoke starts to rise, slowly, cautiously. You watch it curl up past your face toward the ceiling, and then, blessedly, into the new chimney. Not all of it, but enough. You breathe deep. Air. Real air. You sit back, triumphant in the quietest, coldest victory you've ever experienced. Of course, now the fire is burning and the smoke is leaving, but so is the heat. That's the trade-off. More air, more draw, less warmth. You pile stones around the hearth to reflect heat back toward you. Stack up some old rags behind your bedding as insulation, and huddle closer to the flames. It's all about balance. Smoke that doesn't kill you, heat that doesn't leave, and oxygen that doesn't run out. This is the line pioneers walked every day. Some dug their shelters so deep they couldn't get a fire going at all. Smoke would just fill the chamber. Others built chimneys out of sticks and mud, hollow logs, even packed snow. One woman in Nebraska supposedly used the trunk of a dead cactus as a flue, hollowed it out, stuck it through the roof, and burned manure for fuel. Her neighbours called her crazy, until their own shelters started filling with smoke and they copied her setup. You think about her as you poke the fire, watching sparks curl upward into your homemade vent. There's a strange solidarity in it. All of you, across time, building absurd contraptions out of what you can find, just trying to survive a few more nights underground. And then, just as you're starting to feel warm again, the smoke changes direction. It doesn't creep up anymore, it billows sideways. You cough, immediately on alert. You check the chimney, still intact. The air outside must have shifted. That's the thing with makeshift flues. They're moody. Sometimes they work. Sometimes the wind reverses and dumps the smoke right back into your face. It's not just about having a hole, it's about pressure-temperature differences. Drafts. This is frontier thermodynamics, and you're learning it one lungful at a time. You adjust the tarp over the entrance, open the flap a little to create a cross breeze. Slowly the smoke finds its path again, rising, pulling, behaving. You sit back down, exhausted. But you're also, dare you say it, proud. This is your shelter. You dug it. You built its bones. And now you've given it lungs. Crude, blackened lungs, puffing smoke into the pale winter sky. But lungs all the same. It breathes, and because of that, so do you. Night falls. You cook something over the fire, a mash of stale biscuits and melted lard. You pretend it's stew. The flames flicker gently, curling toward your new chimney with something like respect. You wrap your blanket tighter, settle against the wall and close your eyes. Outside, the snow waits patiently for its next move. Inside, your shelter breathes in rhythm with you, and you sleep. Smoky, sore, but still alive. It's the cold that wakes you. Not loud, not sudden, just a creeping chill that slowly works its way under the blanket, up your spine and into your ribs like a whispered threat. You open your eyes and immediately see the problem. The fire's out. Again. Not just smouldering. Completely dead. The last embers lie in the hearth like cold teeth, grey and lifeless. You sit up, breath clouding in the air, and immediately notice the deeper problem. Your breath is visible and not floating. It's hanging low, curling down instead of up, which can only mean one thing. The air inside the dugout is colder than it should be. Way colder. And that means the fire wasn't the only thing that died last night. Something's gone wrong. You pull on your boots with stiff hands, tug your coat around you, and crouch near the hearth. The chimney's still intact. No obvious collapse. No blockage that you can see. You poke through the ash, looking for even the tiniest spark, but it's all cold. You might as well be digging through a graveyard. Which you start to think grimly is kind of what this place is becoming. Your thoughts drift, because that's what happens when you're freezing. To all the ways pioneers tried to heat their shelters without burning everything down. Fire was the most obvious method, sure, but not the only one. Heated rocks, buried hot coals, oil lamps. Some settlers even constructed underground ducts, running them from a fire pit outside into the shelter, channeling warm air like primitive HVAC systems. Of course, most of those required materials you don't have. Bricks, sheet metal, or at the very least more than one pair of hands and a working knowledge of what duct even means. You consider relighting the fire, but the thought of wasting another match, you're down to your last one, gives you pause. If it doesn't catch, that's it, game over. So instead, you wrap your blanket tighter and do what the old-timers did. You wait for the sun. Sort of. The sky never really clears. It just lightens slightly. Less black. More a sullen shade of charcoal. You decide to check outside, half hoping for sun, half dreading what the wind might be doing. You crawl through the entry tunnel, brush aside the canvas flap and stick your head into a world that is somehow even colder than it was yesterday. The wind has shifted again. It's a low humming wind that doesn't scream. It whispers. That kind is worse. The howling ones. You can fight. The quiet ones slide under your clothes and settle in your bones. You move around to the chimney and immediately see the issue. It's frozen over. The top of your makeshift flue is packed with a layer of frost and refrozen snow, thick enough to choke off the airflow. Without draw, the fire choked itself out, and the cold crept back in. You bang it with a rock until the ice cracks loose. It slides off the side of the roof and into the snow below with a thud. A few birds scatter from a nearby bush, surprising you more than it should. Life still exists out here, apparently. You eye the chimney again, now cleared, and feel a flicker of hope. Back inside, you prep your kindling. Dry twigs, a scrap of pine bark, and one of your last candle stubs cut into slivers. You use the match, your final one. With trembling fingers, the spark catches. The fire flares to life. You sit back on your heels, watching the flames as if they're telling you a bedtime story. The smoke rises properly now, drawn upward by the freshly cleared flue. Within minutes, the air starts to warm again, just slightly. Enough that your face stops hurting. You fall into the rhythm of it. Feed the fire, melt snow, check the chimney, watch the wind, repeat. But even as the shelter warms, your thoughts keep circling back to a deeper, older truth. Fire isn't just heat. It's security. It's company. It's the one thing standing between you and the deep quiet of the grave. One story you remember, passed down from a distant great-uncle, was about a man who lived in a dugout through 4 winters. No fire, just layers, of fur, of wool, of earth. He insulated the dugout so thickly, lined it with animal hides and moss, that his own body heat was enough to keep it livable. He reportedly slept curled next to a milk goat for extra warmth. Some say it's legend. Others say it's possible, with enough stubbornness and body fat. Either way, it paints a picture of what life was like when even fire couldn't be trusted to last. There's a reason so many frontier shelters went up in smoke, sparks catching on straw bedding, chimneys backing up, fires left overnight, smouldering too hot in too small a space. One woman famously lost her entire dugout plus 2 oxen when she tried to dry socks over the fire and the beam above caught. Another settler built his hearth too high, too close to the sod roof. The result? Flames found a way. Dugout gone in minutes. He survived. His eyebrows didn't. So now, as your own fire cracks and spits, you find yourself watching it with the wary affection of someone who knows exactly how much trust to give something that's burned everything before. You move your bedding closer to the wall, away from the hearth. Safety first. Then you set a flat stone in front of the fire to act as a reflector, hoping to push more heat into the space, without increasing the flames. Smart, cautious, tired. That's who you are now. The hours pass slowly. You carve a hook from a bit of scrap wood, something to hang a wet sock on. You wrap your boots in canvas to stop the soles from freezing to the floor. You use a bit of old cloth to tie around your neck like a scarf. Everything now is about reducing loss. Heat, energy, sanity. By evening, the fire's still going, and the shelter feels almost livable again. You curl up under your blanket, hands tucked into your sides, watching the shadows flicker across the dirt walls, and then the smoke hole creaks. Just once, a soft pop. You tense, waiting. But nothing else happens. It's like the earth is breathing again, steady even, quiet. You close your eyes, firelight warming your cheek, and sleep comes slowly, wrapped in the smell of ash and clay. By now, your standards for comfort are so low they've tunneled under the floor and kept digging. A flat patch of dirt. Luxury. A night with only mild frostbite. 5 stars. A bowl of something warm and vaguely edible that doesn't crunch unless it's supposed to. Michelin tier. And yet, somehow, the most pressing daily challenge isn't building or firewood or even food, it's sleep. Or more specifically, sleeping in a damp hole without slowly losing your mind. The floor, despite your best efforts, is never quite dry. You've lined it with straw and sticks, even heaved in a slab of bark to use as a sleeping board, but moisture has a way of finding you. It rises from the soil, seeps through the edges. It settles into your clothes, your bedding, your bones. You wake every morning feeling like a half-buried log, cold, stiff, and growing things you'd rather not think about. You crawl out from your cocoon of blanket and canvas, joints popping, and grope for your boots. They're frozen. Again. You slam them against the ground until they loosen up enough to wedge your feet in. The sound echoes through the dugout like a gunshot. You laugh. One of those brittle, sleep-deprived laughs that sounds like it could go either way. Humour or breakdown? You poke the fire, still burning, bless it. The chimney's drawing well after yesterday's fix, and the shelter even smells faintly of smoke instead of swamp. That's progress. You throw on a few twigs and blow gently, the flames flare, you squat beside it, hands out, and pretend you're somewhere civilised: a hearth, a kettle, a chair that isn't also your pantry. But even the warmest fire can't fix what the cold and damp do to your sleep. You haven't had a full night in. You don't even know anymore. Time is warped in here. You dream in snatches, short flashes of colour or sensation, muddy trails, boiling water, voices that may or may not be your own. You wake too often, sometimes from real noises, sometimes from nothing at all. And then there's the other thing, the dreams that feel like memories but aren't yours. It's probably just the setting, sleeping inside the earth like some kind of reanimated settler ghost. But lately your dreams have started slipping into places you can't explain. You dreamed of a child singing in German, of someone carving patterns into the dugout walls by candlelight, of a woman who couldn't stop brushing the dirt off her sleeves even when there was no dirt left. Are they dreams? Hallucinations? Frontier burnout? Probably just your brain making noise in the quiet. You think about how the old pioneers handled it. Some didn't. One journal from a man in the Nebraska Territory mentions how his wife refused to sleep in their dugout after the third night. She claimed the damp made her bones ache and the dark made her forget the shape of morning. She moved into the wagon with their children slept sitting up. Made it through the winter, but never went underground again. Others doubled down, lined their walls with tarps, dug trenches beneath their bedding to divert moisture, even built raised platforms from brush and timber. You consider doing the same. A raised bed, even a few inches off the ground, could help. You grab your hatchet and start eyeing your remaining supplies. Some poles, a few broken branches, nothing elegant. But it doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to hold you. The rest of the day is spent building a platform against the back wall, about a foot high, lashed together with twine and desperation. You use everything. Tent poles, a bent wagon spoke, even the paddle from a cooking pot. It takes hours, but by sunset you've got something that vaguely resembles a bed frame. You toss your bedding onto it and sit, testing it gently. It holds, no squish, no dampness, and you're off the ground. It feels unnatural, like floating. You reward yourself with the last bit of lard melted into snow water. It's more drink than soup, but it's hot, and that's what counts. That night, when you climb onto the platform and lie down, the difference is immediate. The air feels warmer up here. The smell of mould is fainter. The cold doesn't press into your back like it used to. You stare at the ceiling and wait for the dreams. They come, but not the old ones. This time it's something new. A firelit room, larger than your dugout, lined with shelves and bundles of dried herbs. A woman speaking softly in a language you don't recognise, her fingers tracing a pattern in the dirt floor. You wake with a start. No noise, no reason, just that uncanny sense of being watched. You sit up slowly, heart pounding, and scan the room. Nothing, just your shovel in the corner, the fire still glowing, the silent weight of the earth around you. You rub your eyes and lie back down, pulling the blanket tighter. Scholars debate whether sleep deprivation or isolation is more dangerous in these situations. Some claim the lack of sensory input, no sunlight, no varied sounds, can cause mild hallucinations within days. Others argue it's the sleep interruption that pushes people over the edge. When your brain can't rest, it starts inventing things to stay occupied. Sounds, faces, stories. That's how the ghost tales were born. People in dugouts for too long, listening to the wind too closely. You're not there yet, but you can see how someone could get there, easily. Still, the raised bed helps. You get your longest stretch of sleep in days, almost 4 hours without waking. You feel human again. Not totally, but enough to remember that sleep isn't a luxury, it's survival. In the morning you sit beside the fire, sipping hot snow, and realise something both beautiful and a little terrifying. This dugout isn't just a shelter anymore, it's becoming your home, and that means you've already surrendered something. The moment you climb out of the dugout, you feel it. Not the cold, that's constant by now, a second skin, but something deeper, stranger. The air is still, too still, as if the world has paused mid-breath. The snow beneath your boots doesn't crunch the way it usually does. It creaks, like it's thinking. You turn in a slow circle, scanning the horizon. Everything's white, everything's frozen, everything's quiet, and yet, somehow, you know. The storm's coming, not the scattered flurries or icy wind you've already endured. This is the kind they wrote about in letters home, when the sky goes yellow-grey and the snow falls sideways, when oxen vanish in the white and whole cabins disappear under drifts, a true winter storm. And it's not days away, it's hours. You crouch at the roofline inspecting the sod. It's held so far, amazingly, really. But now you don't trust it. Not with what's coming. You press your glove against the frozen surface, feel the brittle edges, the way the dirt shifts under the weight of snow. You'll need to reinforce everything. Roof, walls, entrance, all of it. Back inside, the shelter feels warmer than usual. Not by much, but enough that the condensation on your breath doesn't linger. That's the earth working in your favour. Temperatures underground, even a few feet, stay relatively stable compared to the chaos above. It's a slow change, a sluggish rise and fall. While the world outside turns violent, your dugout stays in its own little climate bubble. Cold, yes, but predictable. Survivable. That's the secret no one tells you. The earth is your blanket. You start fortifying the entrance first. You pack snow around the frame, making a tight seal to block the wind. You wedge sticks vertically along the inside walls and lash them together with twine to form a skeletal brace. Then, from the inside, you stack every spare blanket, coat and piece of fabric you own against the door flap. It's not elegant, but when the storm hits, that flap's the only thing standing between you and the wind clawing down your tunnel like a hungry thing. Next, the roof. You crawl up again, carefully this time, and press down on the weak spot that creaked 2 nights ago. Still holding, but barely. You pile more snow on top, pressing it down, shaping it. Counterintuitive, sure, but it works. Snow, when packed and frozen, insulates like wood never could. The settlers who lived through prairie winters figured that out fast. They'd stack drifts against their homes on purpose, walling themselves in, using winter's worst weapon as armour. You remember hearing about one family in Minnesota who sealed their dugout so completely with snow they didn't see daylight for 12 straight days, lived by candlelight, ate dried beans and salted venison, claimed they didn't even get cold until day 10. When the thaw came, they stepped outside blinking like moles, eyes squinting in the sun. Back inside, you turn your attention to the interior. You add more sticks to your raised platform, lash on extra bark to widen it. You line the underside with straw to trap warmth. Then you rearrange the fire pit, slightly off-centre now, with stones stacked higher on one side to reflect heat toward your bedding. The chimney, so far, is drawing beautifully. No backdraft. No smoke curling along the ceiling like before. The air smells like ash and damp wool. You've stopped noticing the stink of it. It's just part of the shelter now, like the carved initials in the wall from your first night here, or the spot where you always bump your head if you stand too fast. The dugout has become a place of rituals. Firewood goes here, bedding there. Snowpot always to the left of the fire, never the right, or it tips. Your body has mapped every inch, every groove in the wall, every sound it makes as it settles. And then, just as you're adding another log to the fire, it begins. It doesn't start as a howl. That would be too theatrical. It begins as a low hum, almost a vibration, like the prairie itself is groaning beneath the snow. Then comes the hiss, wind sliding across frozen ground, curling under the door flap, tasting the seams. Finally, the roar, like 1,000 wolves in unison. The walls of the dugout don't shake. Not exactly, but you feel the pressure drop. A deep tug in your chest. The storm has arrived. You sit near the fire, listening. The sound of it outside is relentless. Wind striking snow, snow striking the earth, the occasional crack of something large giving way in the distance. Maybe a tree, maybe a roof. You won't know until it's over. You imagine the wagon half buried by now. Your tracks gone. Any sign of you out here erased. And yet, you are here. Safe. Underground. Still breathing. This is where earth insulation becomes more than just a clever idea. It's survival. The thick clay walls hold heat like a slow exhale. They don't let the wind through. The snowpack on the roof acts like a second skin. It muffles the roar, traps warmth, makes your little box of dirt into something closer to a cocoon. And you feel it. The difference between exposure and enclosure, Some settlers used to joke that the only reason they survived was because their shelter was so ugly, even the storm didn't want to come in. Others swore by the physics of it. They'd measure the inside temperature with a hand on the wall. One homesteader in Kansas claimed his dugout stayed a steady 45 degrees all winter, warm enough to keep bacon from freezing, cool enough to keep milk from spoiling. Of course, he also died choking on a biscuit, so maybe his shelter was better engineered than his chewing habits. You think about heat now in real terms. A body, at rest, generates around 100 watts. Multiply that by 2 people, and you've got a literal furnace, slow and inefficient but constant. Every blanket, every wall, every inch of the floor works to trap that warmth. Every time you exhale, the dugout gets a little warmer. It's absurd and beautiful all at once. Outside, the wind screams harder. You hear the flap at the entrance rattle once, then go still. Snow's probably sealed it. Which is good, mostly, unless you need to get out. Still, you're oddly calm. You light a candle, place it on a rock ledge by your bed. The flame barely flickers. That's how stable the air is in here now. That's how insulated you stare at it for a while, watching it move like it's breathing with you. Then you close your eyes, and for the first time since digging this place, you believe you'll make it through the storm. You wake up to scratching. At first you think it's the wind, maybe a branch brushing the dugout wall or snow sliding across the roof. You lie still, heart steady, waiting to hear it again. Nothing. Just the quiet drip of melted frost falling from the roof, the soft hiss of the fire still holding in the hearth. You close your eyes. There it is again. Scratch. Scuffle. Pause. This time, it's unmistakable. Not wind, not snow. Something is moving, something alive. Not a human. There's no knock, no voice, but small, persistent. You sit up, brush hair from your eyes, and listen. The sound is near the entrance, close to the flap you sealed before the storm. You grab your shovel and crawl quietly toward it. More scratching, then a squeak. You exhale. Rats. Of course. Somehow, in all your brilliant planning, fire, chimney, snow-sealed roof, heat conservation, you forgot one very simple truth. Where warmth goes, so do pests. And now your dugout has officially earned its new badge of honour, unwanted tenants. You don't lift the flap, not yet. The storm may have buried the exit entirely, and the last thing you need is a rush of snow cascading into your only safe space. Instead, you thump the wall near the scratching with the flat of your shovel. The sound stops. There's a brief silence, then the tiniest rustling of retreat. You sigh and crawl back to the fire. Congratulations. You have guests. Rats, mice, bugs. Underground living means you're not alone. It's something the early pioneers knew too well. Dugouts offered shelter from wind and snow, sure, but they also offered a welcome mat to every creature that knew how to burrow. And those creatures, by the way, are far better at this than you. Some journals from the 1800s describe dugouts overrun with mice. They'd nest in the walls, eat stored food, chew through leather boots. One woman wrote that she woke up with a mouse sitting on her face, like a tiny furry nightmare. She slept with a frying pan under her pillow after that. You consider doing the same. Of course, rats are the smarter cousins. Crafty, bold, capable of squeezing through spaces the size of a matchbox. If they smelled your meagre food stores, what little's left? They'll be back. You already regret that half biscuit you left sitting on a rock near your bedroll. That's probably what brought them. Your fault. You've been sloppy. You spend the morning reinforcing the lower edges of the shelter, packing clay into gaps, moving your supplies to a hanging sack you lash to the roof poles. You check the bedding. No droppings. Yet. That's the thing. You have to stay ahead of them. Once they're in, once they know your scent, they keep coming warmth and calories. That's all they want. One pioneer trick you vaguely recall is spreading ash along the floor. Mice don't like walking through it. You try that. Sweep out the hearth and scatter the cold remains in a line around your platform. It looks like some kind of arcane ritual, and maybe it is. You're invoking the spirit of please don't chew my face off in my sleep. You set a trap too. Basic old school, bent sapling, a bit of twine, a tin can lid for bait. It's laughably primitive, but it gives you a shred of control. You know the odds are low. Rats are cautious, smart. Some can smell metal and know to avoid it. But you need to try. You need something to focus on besides the increasingly strange dreams. They've gotten worse, or weirder. Last night you dreamed of digging, endless digging. But not with your hands, with claws. And the walls weren't made of dirt, they pulsed like muscle. You woke gasping, heart pounding, convinced for half a second you weren't in the dugout but inside something alive. The feeling lingers. You distract yourself with chores. That's the cure for everything now. Chop wood, melt snow, clean the soot from the chimney, inspect the roof. You almost miss the wind howling outside. It gave you purpose. Without it, the quiet settles in too thick, makes your thoughts echo. It's not just the animals you have to worry about, it's the creep factor. Something no one tells you about living underground. It starts to feel haunted, even when you know it's just you. The walls are so close, the fire flickers against uneven surfaces, throwing strange shadows. You swear sometimes you hear whispering, but it's just the draft curling down the chimney, or the wind sighing through the packed snow outside. Still, your nerves stay alert. People on the frontier used to talk about it. The isolation, the uncanny silence. One settler in Wyoming carved faces into the walls of his dugout, claimed it kept the underground voices company. Another in Iowa painted fake windows with soot to trick his brain into thinking there was a view. These weren't crazy people, just cold, lonely and buried alive by circumstance. You decide you're not there yet. You haven't started naming the shadows. You haven't made dirt friends. You still talk to yourself, but that's normal, right? By mid-afternoon, the scratching starts again. You freeze. It's in a different spot now, closer to your head wall. You move slowly, shovel in hand, and press your ear to the dirt. A faint scuffle, then silence. You tap once. No reply. Still, the paranoia sets in. What if they're inside the wall already? What if you built your shelter in the middle of some underground rodent metropolis? What if this entire hill is hollow, and your roof is really just the top floor of a giant vermin apartment complex? You shake it off. You're tired. That's all. A little fear is healthy. It keeps you sharp. Too much, and you start inventing monsters. You go back to the fire, toss in the last good stick, and stir your pot of snow water and jerky scrap. The broth smells faintly of something edible. You eat it slowly, watching the wall. Still no movement. You stretch out on your raised platform, blanket tucked up to your ears, and try to convince yourself that you're still in control. That this place is yours, that the scratching is just part of the deal, like the creaking roof, like the dreams, like the weight of the snow above. You close your eyes and the shelter breathes with you, warm and dry for now, just you, and the quiet, and whatever's listening behind the wall. The light, when it finally arrives, isn't so much a sunrise as a softening of shadows. You wake with your face turned toward the smoke hole, watching a dull silver glow filter down through the clay like moonlight through fogged glass. You're not sure what time it is. Morning, probably. But in here, time isn't measured in hours. It's measured in how long the fire lasted, how cold your toes are, and whether the roof creaked during the night. It didn't. That's something. The rats didn't come back either, or if they did, they kept their distance. Your little ash perimeter held for now, and the bait tin remains untouched. You still feel them out there, though. A presence, a patience. You can almost admire it. You're surviving. They're surviving. You're just two sets of creatures doing your best to live underground without murdering each other. Today your priority shifts. You've warmed the place, secured the structure, fought off the cold and the wind. But now the problem is something more primal. Darkness. The dugout is pitch black at night, and not just regular dark, total dark, the kind that swallows everything. You can hold your hand an inch from your nose and see nothing, not even movement. Just an endless absence, like floating in a void with the faint smell of soil. Your candle is almost gone. You've got maybe a night or two left of it. After that, it's firelight or nothing. You sit near the hearth, sharpening a stick for no particular reason, and think about how the pioneers dealt with the light. Most didn't have candles to spare. Tallow was precious, and making it meant boiling animal fat for hours, a luxury not many could afford. Oil lamps existed, sure, but only if you had oil, glass, and something stable enough not to tip and burn your face off. So what did they use? Some settlers relied on windows of ice. That sounds absurd at first, but it's true. In northern regions, they'd carve slabs of thick clean ice and insert them into window frames. Ice let in light, refracted and bluish, but still better than nothing. Of course, you'd need a way to keep it from melting, which isn't exactly a problem in your current frozen cave. The idea tempts you. If the snowpack outside is thick enough, Maybe you could hollow out a pocket, shape a crude light tunnel down into the dugout. You step outside to investigate. The air is clearer today, though the cold bites harder. The storm passed, but its teeth left deep marks. Drifts are piled high against the slope. Your chimney is a frozen sculpture now, puffing smoke lazily into the sky. Everything else is white silence. You find a spot just above the dugout and begin digging. Carefully, methodically. You carve a narrow vertical shaft aiming for the corner near your bedroll. The plan is simple. Bore a column of snow through the roofline, then carve out the underside inside the dugout, creating a narrow dome where light can filter down without wind sneaking in. It takes hours. The snow is denser than it looks, layered with ice, crusted with last night's freeze. You chip and pack and smooth until the top of the shaft is open and the base inside the dugout is ready to be carved. When you finally break through the ceiling, light spills down in a hazy cone. Not much, but enough. You step back and blink. Your hands are numb, your knees bruised from kneeling, but you feel like you've just installed the chandelier of the year. The light is soft, blue-white. It lands on the wall near your bedding and makes the whole space feel slightly less like a burial chamber and slightly more like, well, a basement. A muddy, cold basement. But still, you sit under it and watch the light flicker as snowflakes drift past the shaft. It's like watching ghosts float by, a slow, ethereal dance. It won't help much at night, but during the day, it gives your brain something to hold on to. You don't realize how much the darkness has been wearing you down until you see the wall in full detail again. The layers of sediment, the tool marks, even the faint pattern of roots etched into the clay like veins. It's beautiful in its own way. Of course, the ice tunnel isn't permanent. The sun will eventually shift. The shaft might fill with snow or collapse entirely. But for now, you've bought yourself some time, a few extra lumens, a sense of orientation. That's more than most. You think back to an old tale you once read. A settler who painted his dugout walls with white clay to reflect light. He called it poor man's plaster, said it made the place feel like a church. His neighbours thought he was odd, but they copied him anyway. Humans are like that. One person figures out how to stretch the light a little further, and the rest fall in line. By midday your fire's going strong, the shaft is holding, and the light has warmed the dugout by several degrees. You hang your drying socks in the beam of the light just because you can. You feel good. Not happy. This isn't exactly a beach vacation, but steady. In control. Like you've claimed another inch of ground in this eternal tug-of-war with winter. That evening you ration your candle again. Just a bit. Enough to cook. You stew the last of your jerky with some snow water, and the sad little onion you've been hoarding like treasure. It's barely a meal, but the smell fills the space and makes you feel human again. You eat slow, savouring every bite. As darkness rolls back in, the ice tunnel dims. It glows faintly, a pale blue dot overhead. You sit beneath it for a while, wrapped in your blanket, watching the colours fade. It feels like a nightlight for adults. Comforting in a way you didn't expect. Then you hear the scratching again. Not loud, not urgent, but definitely there. The rats haven't left after all. They're patient, careful, waiting. You sigh and lie back on your raised platform facing the ceiling, one arm over your chest, the other near your shovel. Light, warmth, shelter, noise, it's all part of the rhythm now. And tomorrow? Tomorrow you figure out what to do about the rats. The fire dies overnight, again, but this time you're ready for it. You wake not in a panic, but with a grunt and the dry sandpaper burn of cold air in your nostrils. The smoke hole has sealed itself with frost. The coals have gone to ash, and your breath plumes upward like a signal flare no one's going to see. No matter. You're becoming a professional at this now. With a few practiced movements, you crack the frost at the chimney cap, poke the coals, and nurse the fire back to life. It's the only relationship in your life right now that offers consistent results. You sit back on your heels as the fire begins to pop. The heat spreads slowly. It's less like warmth and more like the absence of pain, which is basically the same thing out here. Your stomach growls. It doesn't even try to be subtle about it anymore. It knows you're not eating enough. You're down to scraps, flour dust, a nub of dried onion, and a few pieces of jerky so hard they double as roofing nails. Which brings you to today's mission, cooking. You've avoided it for days, half living off boiled snow and scavenged bits, chewing in silence beside the fire like some lost cave goblin. But now it's time to make something real, or at least real enough to trick your brain into thinking you're not starving. So you take what's left of your supplies and begin the process of frontier culinary wizardry. Cooking underground is its own kind of absurd. You don't have proper ventilation, your chimney barely functions when the wind isn't playing nice, and there's always the looming risk of asphyxiation if you mess it up. Then there's the fire hazard. One good ember too close to the wall, and suddenly your cosy little mud hut turns into a clay oven, with you as the roast. Still, the pioneers did it, daily, with less. You remember reading about families who managed full holiday dinners in dugouts not much bigger than yours, roasted game, stewed vegetables, even pies, all cooked in Dutch ovens buried in hot coals right on the floor. You envy them. You also hate them a little. Mostly, though, you're curious how they kept from burning the place down. Your own fire pit is just a shallow depression lined with stones and wishful thinking. You start simple, a thick gruel of flour, melted snow, and a pinch of lard scraped from a tin. You mix it slowly in your battered pot, stirring with a carved stick because your spoon broke 2 days ago, and you've been pretending it didn't. As it heats, the smell rises. Nutty, faintly sweet, almost nostalgic. Not good, exactly, but warm. You sprinkle in dried onion for taste, then crumble in jerky shavings like you're some kind of backwoods chef with a vengeance. It bubbles, it thickens. You stare into the pot like it's a portal to a better life. Then the smoke starts curling sideways. You freeze. The wind's shifted again, pushing down through the chimney, and the smoke begins backing into the room. You leap into action, flinging open the entrance flap, propping it with a stick, trying to create a cross-draft. The air rushes in, frigid, merciless, and for a moment you're coughing and squinting through the haze. Then the smoke rises. The pressure equalizes, you breathe. Another lesson? Add it to the list. Once the air clears, you sit down and taste your creation. It's gritty, salty, slightly burnt. You chew slowly, thoughtfully, and when you finish the bowl you actually sigh. Not from satisfaction, but from sheer relief. Food. Real, hot food. You feel it all the way into your fingers. As you scrape the pot clean, you think about how the early settlers managed meals in places like this. Some had stoves, wood-fired beasts dragged across the plains, often the most expensive item in a wagon. Others built ovens directly into the earth walls of their dugouts, shaping them from clay and baking bread on flat stones. One story stands out. A widow in South Dakota who cooked with heated rocks, dropping them into a kettle of soup one after the other, to keep it boiling without an open flame. Ingenious, desperate, effective. You consider trying something similar if your wood supply runs lower. You've got plenty of rocks. You even start testing one near the fire, rolling it carefully with a stick, watching the heat creep into its surface. You can't help but smile. This kind of problem-solving feels weirdly satisfying, like you've hacked the apocalypse. Later you rig a reflector behind the fire using a scrap of tin from a food can. Bent into a crude arc, it bounces heat back into the room, concentrating it near your bedroll. The effect is small but noticeable. You begin to understand why some dugouts had mirror panels or whitewashed walls, anything to maximize the meager warmth they could produce. Then comes lighting. The candle's finally gone. You buried the stub in the fire ash like it was a dear friend. Now it's firelight or nothing. The shaft of snowlight overhead still works during the day, but the moment dusk hits, your world shrinks to a flickering radius of 5 feet. You try carving a wick from fabric. You melt a bit of leftover grease in a tin lid, set the wick in it, and light it. It works, badly. The smoke is thick, the smell worse, but the flame holds. You place it in a crevice in the wall and sit back like you've just wired in a chandelier. This is what winning looks like now. A smoky, sputtering grease lamp that gives just enough light to see your own misery by. You lie down that night full, not well fed, but no longer hollow, and for a few minutes you feel genuinely okay. The fire is steady. The roof hasn't creaked once, the rats haven't returned, and you've managed, somehow, to cook in a hole in the ground without killing yourself or accidentally inventing fire-powered cave smoke inhalation. You stare at the ceiling. It's not a beautiful ceiling. It's packed earth, pocked and cracked and lined with dried root veins. But it's held, through the storm, through the cold, through everything. You whisper, "Thank you," to no one in particular, and then you sleep, belly warm, breath steady, in the silent company of flame and stone. The wind dies sometime during the night, and in its absence the silence is absolute. You wake to it, not because it's loud, but because it's too quiet. No creaks, no rattling tarp, not even the gentle whoosh of snow shifting on the roof. Just stillness, deep, pressing, and thick. You blink a few times, listening hard, and slowly realise that this kind of quiet isn't peaceful. It's heavy. Like the land itself has stopped breathing. You sit up, brush frost from your blanket, and rub your face with stiff fingers. Your joints are stiff too, but you're getting used to that. Everything in this place is stiff. The fire is a faint red glow, barely hanging on, but you coax it back to life with a few dry twigs. Once the flame catches, the shadows crawl back into the corners, and the dugout feels less like a tomb. You take inventory. Again, it's become a daily ritual. You count your dwindling food scraps, inspect your firewood pile, insultingly small, tap your water pot, and check the snow shaft for light. It's still open, though narrower now, probably frozen tighter overnight. You'll need to punch it back open soon, maybe widen it if you can without triggering a cave-in. Just one more problem among dozens. But today isn't about food or smoke or creaking roofs. Today is about something rare, human contact. Around midday, as you sit by the fire carving the handle of what you're optimistically calling a spoon, you hear it. A sound you haven't heard in what feels like years. Voices. At first you think it's your imagination, another frontier fever dream. But then it comes again. Muffled words, footsteps, the faint jingle of a harness. You scramble toward the entrance tunnel, pulling aside the flap and shoving snow from the packed seal. Cold air hits your face like a slap, but you don't care. You push your head out into the brightness and blink hard. There, across the drifted rise, are two people. Actual people. Bundled in furs, faces nearly covered, dragging a small sled behind them. One of them spots you and raises a hand. The gesture is cautious, but friendly. You raise your arm in return, heart thudding. They trudge toward you slowly. You recognise the sled style. Flat boards tied with rawhide, built for snow travel. One of them has a rifle slung over their shoulder. The other carries a satchel that looks about ready to split open. They reach the edge of your dugout and pause, eyeing it with mild astonishment. "Thought it was a snowdrift," the taller one says through a thick scarf. His voice is rough, tired, and full of winter. You nod. "Close enough." They grin. What follows is the strangest thing you've done in days. You talk. Actual conversation, stilted and cautious at first, then gradually warmer. Their names are Thomas and Ellie. Neighbours, technically, though in prairie terms that means they're about 3 miles away. They were out checking traps and stumbled across your smoke trail. Thought it might be someone stranded or worse. Ellie tells you flatly that she expected to find a body. You offer her a seat on a crate. She declines. They glance around your dugout, taking it all in. You can tell they're impressed. The roof, the fire, the ice shaft catching light just right. Ellie pokes at your ash perimeter and nods like she's seen it before. Thomas leans near the fire and asks what you've been eating. You tell him, jerky, lard, gruel, and he winces like you slapped him. Without a word, he opens his satchel and pulls out a wrapped cloth bundle. Inside is a small slab of dried venison and, impossibly, a handful of potatoes. Actual potatoes. You stare like he just produced a bag of gold. He shrugs. "We still got a few. You'll make better use of 'em." You don't cry, but something in your chest softens dangerously. They don't stay long. Time's ticking and they still have traps to check before sunset. But before they go, they offer something even more valuable than food. News. The storm you rode out? It buried half the valley. 3 families lost livestock. 1 cabin collapsed entirely. But the thaw is coming. Slow. Sneaky. By the end of the week, daytime temperatures might rise above freezing. Maybe. They're not promising anything. But it's hope, and that's a currency you haven't handled in a while. You watch them vanish back into the snow, tiny figures against the white horizon, and for a long moment you just stand there, cold forgotten, feeling like a person again. Back inside, you sit with the bundle of potatoes in your lap like it's a sacred object. You pick the smallest one, no bigger than a chicken egg, and start planning dinner. You boil it carefully, add flakes of jerky, mash it with lard into a crude stew. The smell alone nearly unhinges you. You eat slow, savouring every bite, chewing like it's the last thing you'll ever taste. Your stomach thanks you. So does your soul. Afterward, you sit near the fire, the dugout glowing softly around you, and you think about how dugouts didn't just shelter people, they forced community out here. Survival meant leaning on each other, even if each other lived 2 hills away. You remember a story you once read about 2 pioneer families who shared a single dugout for a whole winter. 12 people in a space smaller than a chicken coop. They took shifts sleeping, used the same boots, ate from the same pot. Some say they hated each other by spring. Others say they became family. That's the part scholars argue about, the psychological toll. Was it closeness that saved them, or that nearly broke them? Living underground brings people together physically, but it also strips away privacy, identity, everything except need. That makes for strong bonds or permanent damage. Sometimes both. You're still alone here, but not alone, not anymore. Someone knows you're out here. Someone brought potatoes. You smile. It feels unfamiliar, like stretching a scar, but you let it sit. As night falls, the fire dances gently on the ceiling, the wind outside shifts, and your little shelter breathes in sync with you again. You lie back on your raised bed, warm for once, fed better than in days, and with the ghost of conversation still echoing in your ears. Tomorrow maybe you'll try to fix the broken spoon. Tonight you remember how to feel human. When you wake the next morning you half expect it all to be a dream. The visitors, the voices, the gift of potatoes, that fleeting, disorienting taste of normalcy. You lie still under your blanket for a moment, staring at the dark ceiling, waiting for the dream to dissolve. But no, the smoke hole glows faintly with morning light, and over in the corner sits the bundle of cloth you folded so carefully after dinner, still holding 2 precious potatoes. Proof. It really happened. And now it's left you with something unexpected. Perspective. Until yesterday, the dugout was the world. There was only this room, this burrow, and whatever misery, wind, or rodents it contained. But now you're remembering that this is just one shelter among hundreds, maybe thousands, built into the earth by people like you. Which means you're not unique. You're part of something, a pattern, a long, strange line of humans trying to outlast winter by living inside the land itself. That shift in thinking does something weird to your brain. It changes the way you see the dugout. For days, it's been your whole world. Now, it feels small, not in a bad way, just suddenly obvious. The roofline, the corner where water always gathers, the spot where your bedroll sags in the middle. You know this place the way a castaway knows their island, every inch of it. And still, you want out. Not today. You're not suicidal, but you want up, forward. You want the next stage, whatever that means. Which is why, this morning, your mind drifts to something new. What comes after the dugout? You stir the fire and begin the same routine. Melt snow, boil water, chew something resembling food, but this time your eyes keep drifting toward the roof. Not because it's sagging, but because you're imagining what you might build on top of it. That's the path, right? Dig out a cabin. It was always supposed to be temporary. Something to get you through the first winter, maybe the second. After that, you build above ground. 4 walls, windows, a door that locks. Not just a shelter, but a home. You've seen them. Back near the trail, a few families got hold of mail-order homes. You remember how absurd that sounded the first time you heard it, buying an entire house from a catalogue. But it was real. You could order a complete structure from Montgomery Ward or Sears. Lumber, nails, blueprints, even hinges. It all came in one massive shipment. You built it yourself, piece by piece, like an IKEA nightmare for pioneers. Of course, that was for folks with money and luck and access to a rail stop. You have none of those. You have a shovel, a stump for a table, and a rat that still thinks it owns the north wall. But still, you start sketching. Not on paper, you don't have paper. You use the back wall of the dugout carving with your spoon handle. A square here, a rectangle there. You draw a window, a door, a little chimney poking up like a flag. It's crude, like a child's first drawing, but it's enough to plant the seed. Above this roofline someday something will rise. It's a bold thought, almost too bold. You sit back, suddenly aware of how cold the floor is through your knees. It's hard to dream when your teeth are chattering, so you shift back into action, into now. You bundle up and go outside to check the snow. Not just the depth, but the feel of it. Something is changing. The top layer has softened slightly. Your boots don't crunch, they press. The wind is still biting, but the sun feels more honest. Not just lighting the land, but warming it, if only a little. The sky has that washed-out late winter look. You squint upward and for a second you smell mud. It's faint, buried under layers of frost and wood smoke, but it's there. The earth is starting to wake up, and that changes everything. Inside, the dugout feels different now. Not like a prison, not even like a tomb, but like what it always was supposed to be, a launch pad, a pause between one life and the next. You look around at your possessions, such as they are, and start mentally sorting. What goes, what stays, what you'll use to build the next thing. The whispering voices in the walls are gone today. No rats, no dreams. Just the fire, your breathing, and the dull scrape of your spoon on the wall as you add tiny shingles to your sketch. You're practically an architect now. You remember a story, told in one of the smaller settlements, about a woman who started building her cabin from inside her dugout. She marked out the floor plan with sticks above the snow-laid foundation stones whenever the frost let up, even if it was just 1 or 2 a day. By spring her cabin was halfway framed. She moved in before the first summer thunderstorm. Another story tells of a family who never left the dugout. They added a second room, then a third. Reinforced it with timber, added a sod chimney, even ran a rope from the roof to a bell in the corner so they could signal each other during whiteouts. Some people said they were just stubborn. Others said they were smart. Why build above ground when the earth works just fine? Scholars debate that point too. Was moving above ground progress, or just a shift in aesthetics? The answer depends on who you ask. What matters is that for every family who dug out, there was one who stayed put and another who moved on entirely. The dugout was never the end of the story. Just a chapter. You spend the rest of the afternoon tending to your supplies, sorting gear and adding stones to the entryway wall to block more wind. The motion keeps you warm, keeps you thinking. That night you light your grease lamp and sit beneath the ice shaft, staring at the ceiling again. It's familiar now. Ugly, but faithful. You rest your hand on the wall, feeling its solid, cold strength, and you murmur a quiet thanks. Not dramatic, not spiritual, just real. For what it's worth, this place kept you alive, and it's almost time to leave it. The next morning brings a strange sound. Not the wind, not the creaking roof, and not the soft scrape of rodents in the walls. No, this is different. This is a drip. A single, solitary drop of water landing on the stone lip of your fire pit. You hear it before you see it. Then, when you peer into the shadows beside the hearth, there it is again, drip. Then another, drip. Each one echoes a little louder than it should in the stillness of the dugout, like the world outside is knocking on your door with a soft, wet finger. You scramble out of your bedding, ignoring the stiffness in your back, and press your palm to the floor. It's still cold, but not biting. Then to the wall, same thing. Damp, but not threateningly so. Then you reach up and feel a tiny line of moisture tracing its way down from the smoke hole. Outside, spring has started whispering. You tug on your boots and clamber up the tunnel, breath misting in the confined space. When you lift the flap, what you see almost stuns you. The white has changed. The snow isn't bright and reflective. It's dull now, heavy, greying at the edges. Melt patterns ripple across the drifts, and for the first time in what feels like years, there is liquid water on the surface, tiny puddles forming in footprints. You take a step forward and your boot doesn't crunch. It sinks. The sun overhead is brighter, realer. The sky, no longer flat white, is that delicate powder blue that only happens right before the world remembers how to be warm. The air still bites your skin, but there's something behind it now, a gentleness. You close your eyes, turn your face toward the light and exhale slowly. You smell wet dirt. This moment, the thaw, is what every settler waited for, longed for, survived for. Because once the melt begins, everything changes. You're no longer just holding on. Now, slowly, you're gaining ground. And with that shift comes a new awareness. This land was never empty. Not truly. Not even when the snow buried it. As the sun warms the surface, you start noticing tracks. Animal prints. Small ones. Fox. Maybe rabbit. Something else. You can't identify them all, but they're fresh. That means life never left. It just went quiet. And that's when you remember what you should have remembered weeks ago. The people who knew this land before you ever arrived. The ones who didn't need to guess how to survive a winter out here. the ones whose homes were already shaped by the land, not dropped onto it like an afterthought. Native peoples, many of them, lived underground long before any settler brought a shovel west. Not out of desperation, but design. They built pit houses and earth lodges. Some were circular, some rectangular, dug deep, roofed with logs and earth, vented properly, insulated with purpose, not panic. They didn't fight the earth, they partnered with it. One tribe in particular, the Mandan, out near the Missouri River, created winter homes that were marvels of engineering. Thick walls of packed sod, central fire pits vented through smoke holes, and extended entryways designed to trap heat. Entire communities lived underground in clustered dwellings, protected from the elements, perfectly adapted to their environment. And they didn't just survive, they thrived. You crouch beside your own entrance and realise just how much of your shelter was improvised compared to what they built with intention. Your dugout is a reaction. Theirs was a strategy. There's an awkward truth in that. As a settler, you came here thinking you were carving something new from an untouched land. But in truth, you're just building over blueprints that have existed for centuries. And not only did you come unprepared, you came unwilling to ask. Some settlers did better, a few learned. They watched, listened, traded knowledge. There's an old account of a Swedish immigrant woman in Montana who learned how to build an earth lodge from a Lakota elder. They didn't share a language, but they shared the understanding of cold. She said it was the only reason she lived through her second winter. But most weren't that wise. Most settlers built too shallow, vented poorly, or insulated with the wrong materials. And when their homes collapsed or froze or flooded, they blamed the land instead of their own arrogance. You think about that as you climb back down into your dugout. The place feels a little different now. Still yours, but no longer the centre of the world, just a notch in the hillside. Just one of many shelters layered over this stretch of earth. Layers on layers, some forgotten, some long gone, some just beneath your feet. You wonder if someday someone else will find this place. Maybe decades from now. Maybe centuries. A hiker, maybe. Or a farmer ploughing deep. They'll dig into the side of this hill and find the remains of your bed platform, your fire pit, the spoon handle you carved. They'll guess what kind of life you lived here. Maybe they'll think you were brave. Maybe they'll think you were desperate. Maybe they'll feel the walls and wonder if you were lonely. You hope they find your crude wall sketch, the little dream cabin carved into the dirt, that it makes them smile, that it reminds them you weren't just surviving, you were planning. Later that afternoon, you boil the last of your potatoes into a thick mash with onion and water. It's your best meal yet. You sit near the fire and eat slowly, watching the steam rise through the smoke hole. The drip continues, one slow drop every few minutes, but you don't mind it now. Each one is a clock tick, a sign that time is moving forward again. The dreams come back that night. Not the clawed digging or the shadow voices. This time, it's different. You're standing in a wide field, barefoot, the grass warm beneath your feet. The dugout is behind you. And in front of you, a cabin, framed and tall, smoke curling from a proper chimney. You feel sun on your neck, birds overhead. Something you almost forgot existed. You wake smiling. It's not morning yet, the fire's low. But you lie there for a while in the glow of that dream, not quite ready to let go. And when you do rise, you move with new purpose. The thaw has started, and you have a house to build. You don't rush it. That's the first lesson. After weeks of desperation, fear, and digging like your life depended on every swing of the shovel, because to be fair, it did, now you move slower. With intention, the weather's still treacherous. The snow's melting, yes, but it's not gone. Some days it softens just enough to trick you, then freezes back to glass by nightfall. The ground is soggy, reluctant to give anything up. The dugout creaks less now, but the land around it has started to moan. A slow, thawing sound, like ice stretching awake after a long sleep. So you start thinking in projects. Not escape, or rebuild, or rescue projects. Just small ones. A new vent. A better support beam. A storage alcove carved into the back wall. These things don't just pass the time. They're your way of reclaiming something. Ownership, maybe. Or sanity. You're not surviving anymore. Not exactly. You're settling in. Even if you're planning to leave eventually. That's when the idea hits you. You're sitting near the fire one afternoon, gnawing on a slice of dried meat that tastes like saddle leather, when your eyes drift to the back wall. You've carved a few notches there already. Just dates mostly. Days survived, days endured. But now you get curious. You grab your fire-sharpened stick and begin scratching into the dirt wall. Not letters, but lines. A grid. Then you mark the measurements of the dugout. Length, width, approximate height. You carve a layout. Add the hearth, the bed, the chimney, the shelf. Suddenly, your shelter isn't just a space you live in. It's a map, a design. You're turning your misery into a blueprint. You step outside and do the same with the land. Slowly. One patch at a time. You walk out a little further from the dugout than usual, down past the drift line, where the soil's starting to emerge in streaks. Black. Thick. Cold as sin, but waking up all the same. You mark off a rectangle with 4 broken branches, rough cabin dimensions, maybe 10 by 12, maybe a loft. You're dreaming again, and that alone is a miracle. That night you can't sleep. But not from cold, not from fear. This time it's something stranger. Momentum. You've grown so used to stillness that now, the idea of motion, of building something, even just planning for it, has set your body buzzing. You lay awake listening to the fire pop, running through lumber counts in your head, remembering what boards you have left from the wagon, what you could scavenge from trefoils once the snow's fully gone. And then a thought hits you like a falling beam. The dugout might last longer than you do. Not because it's perfect, not because it's beautiful, but because, unintentionally, you've built something that works with the land. The earth wraps around it, protects it. You've spent so much time thinking of it as a temporary stopgap that you never considered the possibility. What if this thing sticks around? What if, long after you've left, someone else stumbles upon it, maybe even uses it? You think of the tales, some you heard in passing, some buried in letters or local legends, about shelters uncovered decades later, still mostly intact. One family supposedly discovered a dugout beneath the foundation of their new barn. The walls had sagged, the roof was long gone, but you could still see where someone had carved tally marks into the clay one mark for every day they survived. There's another story, a fringe one naturally, about a perfectly preserved dugout found in Kansas, complete with a clay stove, soot stains, and a single wooden chair. No one could explain how it hadn't collapsed. One theory? The original builder used prairie sod mixed with animal hair and ash, an unholy concoction that somehow repelled both moisture and rot. No one's been able to replicate it since. Maybe it was luck, maybe it was genius, or maybe the land just decided to keep that one secret. You wonder if your dugout has secrets. You wonder if decades from now someone will find your wall sketch and think you were an architect or a lunatic, or both. You decide to add to it. You spend the next day carving in detail, fireplace design, shelf supports, even a little drawing of your grease lamp rig. It's crude, but it tells a story. This is how I lived. This is how I lasted. You're not thinking legacy. You're thinking clarity. This is the first time in weeks you've had the mental space to reflect, to create something that isn't just about survival. You even make a door. Not a real one, not yet, but a prototype. 2 flat boards scavenged from the broken cart, hinged together with twine and scrap leather. You wedge it into the tunnel, replacing the tarp flap, and just like that your dugout feels less like a hole in the ground and more like a structure. Like a place someone made on purpose, like a home. The change is psychological more than practical. The wind still slips through the seams and it won't hold back a bear or even a determined squirrel. But standing there, opening and closing it by hand, hearing the dull thud as it settles into place, you feel powerful. Silly, but powerful, like you've tamed a tiny corner of chaos. That night, after the fire's gone low, you crawl into bed with your arms tucked around your ribs, and the silence doesn't press as hard. The wind has died down again. The smoke rises cleanly. The air in the dugout is cool but steady, and you feel something close to pride. You're not just surviving anymore, you're designing, you're creating structure inside the chaos. Tomorrow, maybe you'll start cutting timber, if the thaw holds. Maybe you'll draft a real roof line. Maybe you'll even build something above ground for the first time in months. But tonight, you sleep beneath dirt and snow and sky, in a shelter born from fear, shaped by necessity, and now surprisingly standing as proof that even accidental engineers can leave something behind. You don't hear the collapse. That's the most terrifying part. There's no warning crack, no groan from the roof, no avalanche of dirt and sticks in the night. It just happens, silently, while you're outside, gathering water from a melt pond forming near the tree line. The air is warmer today, almost soft. The sky has taken on that watery spring blue that makes you forget, briefly, just how cruel winter can be. You're down to your shirt sleeves for the first time in weeks, fingers raw but not freezing, and it's just starting to feel like you've finally turned a corner. You return, water sloshing in your pot, and the first thing you notice is the smoke. Thin, drifting, not from your chimney, but from inside the entry tunnel. That's odd. You walk faster, then you see the dirt. It's everywhere, piled around the opening like a miniature landslide. Your stomach sinks before your brain catches up. You drop the pot and rush forward, clawing through the entry tunnel, pulling back the makeshift door you were so proud of yesterday. The smoke is thicker now. Not choking, but wrong. Cold smoke. Smoke without fire. And then, as your eyes adjust to the darkness inside, you see it. The roof has given way. Not completely. Just a section above the hearth. But it's enough. One of the main support beams split, likely from a hairline crack that finally gave out under the softening of the melt. Half the roof caved in, burying your cooking shelf, smashing your stone reflector, and knocking the grease lamp from its nook. The fire is smothered, drowned in ash and collapsed clay. You stand there, frozen, staring at the wreckage. It's not just a structural failure. It's emotional. You built this. You maintained it. You trusted it. And in one blink, it's reminded you that everything out here is temporary. Your hands tremble, not from cold this time, but from adrenaline. You begin clearing debris in a panic, throwing aside chunks of sod, broken sticks, collapsed wall. The soot smears across your shirt, your arms, your face. You don't care. You need to know how bad it is. You need to do something. The good news, if there is any, is that most of your bedding is untouched. The cave-in was confined to the fire pit corner. The raised platform is still stable. The wall sketch survived. Even your sketchy chimney is still upright. But the heart of the dugout, the place you built for warmth and cooking and light, is gone. You sit down on the floor, surrounded by rubble, and breathe. Slowly. It's not the end. You're alive. The shelter didn't bury you, but you feel the familiar fingers of frustration creeping back in, curling around your throat. This is how it happens, you think. Not in a blizzard, not in the darkest night, but in moments like this, warm, bright, almost safe, when you let your guard down. You think about the others, the stories, the cabins that collapsed in the first thaw, the families buried alive under snow-heavy roofs. One story comes back, chilling in a new way now. A settler named Claymore. He and his brother built their dugout into the side of a bluff. It lasted a full season. Then, one afternoon in March, the roof gave out without a sound. Claymore was inside. His brother was outside. By the time they dug him out, it was too late. You shake the story away. It's not helpful. But now you understand why those tales stuck around. They weren't just warnings. They were reminders. The land is patient, but it is not merciful. If you stop paying attention, it eats what you build. The rest of the day becomes damage control. You clear the collapsed dirt, reset the rocks that hadn't shattered, and start rethinking your design. A central hearth might not be safe anymore. Not unless you reinforce it with real timbers, which you don't have. You move the fire pit toward the entrance tunnel, where the ceiling height is lower, but better supported. It's cramped, awkward, but safer. You'll rebuild the reflector wall there, use flat rocks from the creek bed if they're not frozen solid. The grease lamp is toast, literally. You find its warped base in the debris, blackened and useless. You sigh and toss it outside. You cook nothing that night. You're too tired, too smoked out. You melt a little snow and sip it, chewing a raw bit of jerky just to keep your stomach quiet. The shelter is colder now without a central fire. The shadows feel longer. The smoke shaft doesn't draw as well in its new position, and the air gets hazy quick. You open the flap and let the night air sweep through just to clear it. Sitting on your bedroll, shivering, staring at what used to be your proudest achievement, you have to admit it. This shelter is temporary. All of it is. It doesn't matter how well you build it, how clever your tricks. Eventually the land decides when your time is up, and maybe that's okay. Maybe it has to be. You light a candle stub, one of the last, and use its glow to inspect the wall sketch. The dream cabin, still there, untouched by the collapse. You trace a finger along the lines of the roof, the door, the tiny chimney. Still possible. Still yours. You're not giving up. But you are adjusting. You fall asleep to the sound of water dripping steadily from the cracked ceiling. Not dangerous, just persistent, like the land reminding you, softly, that it's still in charge. Tomorrow you'll reinforce the roof, maybe rebuild part of the hearth, maybe start cutting logs for that cabin after all. You'll figure it out. You always do. But tonight you sleep in a wounded shelter warmed by a dying candle, listening to the world melt slowly back into life. There's something strangely theatrical about a pioneer holiday. You wake up the next morning, still sore from the roof collapse, still brushing soot from your sleeves, and realise with a start that it's Thanksgiving or close to it. You'd been keeping tally marks, and by your rough estimate, today is the day. Of course, the dugout doesn't care. There's no turkey roasting, no warm bread scent floating from the oven, no children laughing over polished wooden floors. Just you, alone, sitting on a dirt shelf in a patched-up hole in the ground, squinting into the smoke trail of your half-rebuilt fire. But you can't let it pass. Not entirely. Even if it's just another frozen day and a long stretch of survival, your body wants to mark it. Needs to, maybe. Because for pioneers like you, a holiday wasn't about celebration. It was about proof. Proof that you were still alive, that you could stop long enough to recognise the calendar, not just the weather, that you had a reason, however small, to acknowledge that time hadn't stopped swallowing you whole. So, today, you decide to try something absurd. You're going to celebrate. You start by straightening the place up, which takes more effort than you'd expect in a space smaller than a root cellar. You sweep the ash from the corners, tamp down the wet patches near the walls, and hang the last clean rag over the smoke hole to act as a makeshift curtain. The result is not impressive, but it's something. You even fold your blanket into a neat square and perch it on your sleeping shelf like it's waiting for a guest who's already an hour late. Then comes the real challenge, the meal. You gather your pitiful pantry, 2 scraps of jerky, 1 potato half, shriveled, a few tablespoons of flour, and the heel of something that was maybe once a biscuit. It's laughable, but you treat it with ceremony. You soak the biscuit in snowmelt to soften it. Slice the potato thin so it stretches. Fry the jerky in lard, scraping the bottom of the pan for every last bit of fat. You even sprinkle a little ash for seasoning, partly by accident, partly on purpose. Adds a certain pioneer crunch. You pile it all into your tin bowl and sit down with your back against the far wall. The heat from the fire brushes your knees. You say nothing, no prayer, no speech, but you look at your food and nod once. This is your feast. You're grateful. Not for the meal necessarily, but for the fact that it exists at all. And then you eat. You chew slowly, trying to savour each bite. The potato is mealy, the jerky nearly breaks a molar, and the biscuit still tastes like regret. But together they feel like tradition. A ridiculous, dirt-covered, deeply humble tradition. And somehow, that makes it sacred. You wonder what other settlers did during holidays in dugouts like this. The records are spotty. Most people didn't waste ink on the sentimental stuff. But here and there, you find clues. Fragments of journals, faded letters home. One woman wrote that she baked a pie using nothing but dried apples and melted snow. No crust, just fruit and fire. Her kids called it pioneer pudding. Another family set an extra place at their dugout table, just a flat rock near the wall for a relative back east. They passed a cup around and told stories while the wind howled overhead. No presents, no turkey, just presents. You think about those people now, not as ghosts, but as neighbours. You're all part of the same timeline, the same stubborn refusal to let circumstance dictate meaning. If they could find celebration in a hole in the ground, maybe you can too. You finish the last bite of biscuit, wipe your mouth with the back of your hand and lean your head against the wall. It's warm here, oddly enough. Sunlight from the ice shaft lands on this patch around midday, and the clay holds the heat like a whisper. You decide to give yourself the rarest luxury of all, an afternoon with no tasks. Just one, no building, no chopping, no reinforcing the roof, no hunting for wood. You sit, you breathe, you let the dugout be a shelter instead of a job. The quiet presses in, not heavy this time, but comforting. Like a thick quilt made of silence and dirt. Eventually, because your hands can't help themselves, you start carving again. Not repairs, not sketches, something different. You scratch a small figure into the wall beside your bed. A man standing beside a tree, one hand raised toward the sky. It's not detailed, just shapes. But it says something. That you were here. That this wasn't just a season of survival. That even in hunger, in cold, in collapse, you marked the moment. Later you tear a strip from the last bit of linen and write one word on it with a burned stick. Enough. You pin it to the wall using a splinter of wood. It doesn't look like much, but it makes you smile. You remember another story, half folk tale, half real. A small group of homesteaders stranded by snow in the Dakotas once carved a turkey into their dugout wall as a joke. Every year after that, they came back and added more. Pumpkins, trees, even a crude child's face. When the blizzard finally broke, they moved out and built proper houses, but the drawings stayed. Local kids found them decades later and thought they were cave paintings. You wonder if your tree will survive the thaw. As night falls, the fire burns low and the air cools, but your spirits stay oddly lifted. You lie back on your shelf and stare at the ceiling, your stomach fuller than it's been in days, your heart steadier than it was yesterday. Outside, the wind begins to rise again. Not a storm, just the nightly voice of winter, reminding you it's not quite done. But this time, you don't curl up small. You stretch out. You let it sing. You're not winning. Not exactly. But for one strange quiet holiday in a buried dirt shelter, you're living. And that today is enough. It starts with a smell. Rich, earthy, damp in a way that isn't quite rot but life coming back. You notice it when you roll out of your bedding the next morning, joints cracking like frozen twigs, and catch a faint scent drifting through the tunnel. You pause, sniff again, and there it is. Mud. Real mud. The kind that only forms when the ground decides it's tired of sleeping and begins to rise again, groggy and slow, from under the snow. By the time you crawl outside, the scene is almost unrecognizable. The landscape has transformed. The snow is no longer an endless blanket. It's fractured patchy. Great islands of white floating between open soil like someone punched holes in winter's skin and let the spring seep through. The sky is silver today, a pale bowl with streaks of warmth hiding just behind the clouds. You can feel it on your cheeks, in the wind, softer now, more curious than cruel. You glance back at your dugout, this hunchbacked little creature of dirt and frost, and realize the ground around it has begun to sag. The sod at the edges has turned to mush. One corner of the roof has sprouted a tiny rivulet of water, tracing a line down the clay like a slow tear. You know what that means. The clock is ticking. This shelter won't last forever. Not through spring rains, not through the weight of wet earth. It was built to hold out the cold, not to weather thaw. So, you begin the pivot. That morning, with frost still clinging to the grass, you drag out your tools. All three of them. The hatchet, the dull saw you've babied all season, and your trusty shovel, the same one that built this shelter in the first place. You check the edges for rust, rub them down with lard and head for the trees. The forest is still stiff with the memory of winter, but the branches creak differently now, less brittle, more flexible. You walk carefully, stepping around patches of slush and ice, scanning for fallen limbs. You're not ready to fell anything big yet, not without help and certainly not without a better axe, but deadwood that you can manage, and you do. You haul back your first log like it's a prize buck. It's crooked, half-rotten and soaked at one end, but it feels like progress. You stack it beside the dugout and go back for more 2 trips, then 3. By noon, you've collected enough to start a frame, nothing fancy, just the bones of a real structure. You decide to build beside the dugout, not on top of it. That's instinct now. You don't trust the roof to hold anything heavier than a squirrel, so you mark off a patch of ground with a stick. 10 paces long, maybe 7 wide, just enough for a single-room cabin. You pace it again. Then again, you feel like a dog turning in circles before lying down. You remember a tale from a fur trapper who once built his own cabin in a single week, working sunrise to moonlight. Said it nearly killed him, lived in it 5 years after. You've got time, you've got wood, and you've got something new, momentum. You spend the afternoon stripping bark, trimming limbs, stacking your haul. No nails, of course. Not yet. You'll notch the corners, bind the joins with leather scraps and wire when you can. It won't be pretty, it might not even be straight, but it will stand. As you work, you begin to hum. It surprises you. You haven't made sound for no reason in weeks. Every word, every grunt, every breath has been tied to effort or necessity. But now, as you strip bark and stack timber, the hum rises unbidden. A half-remembered tune, something from childhood. Your voice cracks when you try to follow it, so you keep it wordless, just sound. Something to fill the thawed air. And then something remarkable happens. A bird, not a huge majestic symbol of rebirth, just a little thing, maybe a sparrow with feathers still fluffed against the cold. It lands on a low branch a few feet from you, tilts its head, and chirps once, twice. Then it's gone, a blur of brown into the trees. You stand there with your mouth open like someone just handed you a crown. It's not that you didn't think they'd come back. You just forgot. You forgot there would be a day when the sky wasn't silent, when the only wing beats weren't ghosts or the pounding in your own head. That single chirp feels louder than any storm you've weathered. Back at the dugout, you find the meltwater creeping in. It seeps through the walls in thin, slick rivulets. The clay holds for now, but you can see the warping begin. You stuff rags and straw into the worst gaps. Muttering to yourself, you consider moving your bedding to higher ground, maybe even outside under the tarp when the nights are warm enough. You're not ready to abandon the dugout entirely, not yet. But its expiration date is beginning to show, and that changes how you see everything. The cramped corners, not oppressive anymore, just familiar. The soot stains on the walls, that's your fireplace's signature. The carved plans near your bedroll, you add to them sketch the cabin's frame now, label the logs, dream in lines and angles. You even draw a little version of yourself outside the door, holding a bucket, smiling like a maniac. You fall asleep that night feeling sore, exhausted, but more alive than you've been in weeks. The fire burns low, but the room holds the warmth. The ice shaft drips steadily. Somewhere outside a new wind stirs, one that smells like wet wood, not snow. You whisper a thank you to the dugout, not because it's pretty, not because it's safe, but because it gave you this one wild, strange gift, the chance to begin again. And tomorrow, you'll lay your first logs. You don't lay the first logs tomorrow, you wake to rain. At first it's hard to place. The rhythm is too soft to be snow, too consistent to be wind. It patters against the tarp you hung over the dugout's entrance, and trickles down the slope with the slow, smug sound of nature reclaiming its territory. You lie still in the dimness of early morning, staring up at the ceiling and watching as drops of water worm their way through tiny seams in the clay, forming thin, dark fingers on the walls. The dugout is sweating, or weeping, or both. You sit up, shove your damp blanket aside, and immediately feel it. The chill of wet earth under your hands, that sponge-like give in the dirt floor that tells you the frost is all but gone. This is the phase that every pioneer dreaded, the rot weeks. Snow was harsh, yes, but clean. Rain is something else entirely. Rain is rot, mould, insects, weakening supports. It finds every flaw in your structure and spreads it like gossip. And if you built your shelter with shortcuts, and you did, now's when the ground cashes in its debts. You crawl out through the tunnel, now slick with slime and shedding clumps of clay from its ceiling. The tarp flap sticks to your palm. When you peel it back, a breath of thick, wet air washes over you. The world outside is a swamp. The snow's retreat has left behind a battlefield of mud, half-frozen puddles, and something that might once have been grass but now looks like it gave up trying. The wind is gentle but damp, and the forest in the distance is laced with fog. Everything smells of wet bark and rotting roots, and yet it's still somehow an improvement over the death-still silence of deep winter. You spend the first hour of the day digging a drainage trench around the dugout. Not elegant, just a hasty moat to keep the mud from pouring into the tunnel. You remember reading that some settlers carved actual French drains around their shelters, long gravel-filled troughs with careful slopes. You, however, use a stick, your shovel, and a few choice curses. It's all very technical. As you dig, your boots suction with every step. The earth clings like it doesn't want to let go, and your firewood pile, which you so carefully stacked beneath an overhang last week, it's soaked. Every log. The ends are black with water. You pull one apart and find it's gone soft, the bark peeling like skin from a blister. So you pivot. Again, because that's all spring is for the frontier dweller, pivot after pivot. Every time you think you're moving forward, the world shifts under your boots and says, "Try again, genius." Inside, the dugout is worse. The floor is now half mud, half mat. You reinforce the bed platform with flat rocks. The back wall, which held your wall art and your dream sketches, is weeping so badly that the lines are starting to blur. The cabin plan is melting. You trace it with your finger anyway, firming up the edges before they vanish completely. The image is stubborn, like you. It refuses to disappear entirely. Later that day, the rain lets up just long enough for you to drag some logs toward your planned cabin site. You roll them into place, notching one with the hatchet just to see how it feels. It's awkward, slow, and slightly pathetic. But it's real. You can see the bones of the frame now, even if it's just a row of logs lying in mud like fallen soldiers. They'll dry, eventually. Maybe. You tell yourself they will. There's a pioneer account you remember reading. An old man writing in shaky cursive, recalling how his father built their family's cabin during the spring melt of 1857. He said they spent more time chasing logs downstream than stacking them. At one point their firewood pile floated away entirely. They cooked on moss-covered stones and slept in hammocks strung between wagons. And yet, by summer, they had a home. That story sticks with you now, partly because of the absurdity, partly because of the reminder. This season isn't about beauty, it's about persistence. Spring is the con. It whispers of freedom, then gives you ankle-deep sludge. It teases you with birdsong, then dumps a fresh storm on your half-built roof. It offers you green shoots, then unleashes mosquitoes like a biblical punishment. You're not in paradise, you're in the in-between. But here's the thing, you're still here. That matters. That night the fire refuses to stay lit. Everything is too damp. You burn damp sticks for smoke more than heat, the entire dugout thick with fog and frustration. You wrap yourself in the blanket, pull your knees to your chest and tell yourself stories. Not ones you heard, ones you make up. You imagine a version of yourself 10 years from now, standing in front of a full cabin, sturdy, maybe even smug, telling this exact tale to someone new, a neighbour, a friend. You say it like a joke. Yeah, I lived in a hole in the ground once, mud dripping from the walls. Fire wouldn't catch for days, built a whole cabin on soup and spite. They laugh. You laugh. It becomes a badge of honour. That fantasy gets you through the night. The next morning the rain stops completely. The sky clears just enough to remind you it has colour, not just cloud. And a new bird sings from the tree line, louder this time, less tentative, like it's decided to stay. You smile. Then you grab your saw and start notching another log. By the third day of mud season, everything you own smells like a compost pile. Your blanket, your boots, even the air inside the dugout. It's all gone a little sour. Wet earth, damp ash, and that persistent swampy mildew that creeps in even when you swear you've dried everything twice. And yet, somehow, you feel lighter. Maybe it's the fresh air, because yes, you've been keeping the flap open during daylight, even if it means letting a few bugs in. Or maybe it's just the sheer delirious fact that you're still standing. You no longer start your mornings in panic. There's no mad scramble for warmth, no breath held for signs of roof collapse or chimney backdraft. Instead, you wake with the first light, grey and thin as stretched wool, and lie there a minute listening. The ice shaft still drips, but it's slower now, softer. You've taken to counting the seconds between drops, like some kind of subterranean metronome. It's strangely meditative. Once up, you perform your new daily ritual, checking the cabin logs. You've managed to raise 2 full corners now, just 4 or 5 feet high, but standing stacked, notched, and locked in place with leather lashings. They're not pretty. In fact, one of them leans slightly like it's reconsidering its life choices, but they're solid, and they're yours. You work slowly, pacing yourself, because that's the only pace the mud allows. The earth sucks at your boots with every step, like it wants to remind you that it could eat you whole at any moment. Still, you gather more logs, cut more notches. Every thud of hatchet on bark feels like a heartbeat. You are building, not improvising, not patching. Building. Mid-morning, a gust of wind picks up from the south, warm enough to smell of grass and something almost floral. You pause, close your eyes, and inhale deep. You swear there's a hint of sagebrush on the breeze. You haven't smelled anything green in so long that your senses practically short-circuit. It hits you hard. Makes you remember spring mornings as a kid. Wet grass, barefoot runs through puddles, the freedom of knowing no one needed you to be anything but alive. You spend the afternoon hauling more timber, your hands raw again, but for the first time in weeks they're cracked from labour, not frostbite, that feels like progress. Your palms are mapped with blisters, calluses and dirt so deeply ground in that it might as well be part of your skin now. But you don't wear gloves anymore. You don't need them. This is your work and you want to feel every second of it. Around noon, you hear something unusual. Not birdsong, not the wind, but bells. Tiny, distant, metallic. You freeze, log on your shoulder, and tilt your head. There it is again. Faint, irregular, but definitely bells. You squint across the horizon and finally spot them. A small herd of cattle picking their way along a muddy ridge, guided by a man on horseback in a worn hat. He doesn't see you at first. Then he does. He lifts a hand. You lift yours. No words are exchanged, just that single motion. And in that brief acknowledgement you feel the vast web of life returning to the land. You're not alone. Others are coming back out, emerging from their winter dens. The landscape is waking up. You smile and return to work. Later you catch yourself humming again. A different tune this time. No words, just a rhythm to match the swing of the hatchet. You set the next log, wedge it in place, and step back. Your wall is growing, not fast but steadily. You're making height now, and with it comes the strange sensation that you're pushing back against the sky, challenging it to crush you again. But this time, you've got structure. That evening you take stock. You've got 10 logs left, already stripped and ready. Enough to finish one more full wall. You'll need more, of course. But the foundation is no longer theoretical. You've turned sketches into timber. Inside the dugout it's noticeably cooler now. You haven't kept the fire going full time. It doesn't need it. Instead, you light a small flame at night for comfort, not survival. Just enough to cast dancing shadows across the wall. The earth is drying, slowly. The floor still squishes in one corner, but the rest is firming up. You've stopped trying to repair it. Let the dugout be what it is now. A cocoon. Temporary. Precious. Fragile. You lie on your bedroll that night and trace the ceiling lines with your eyes. They're familiar now, almost affectionate. Every bulge, every soot streak, every tiny crack holds a memory. That's the thing about living underground. You learn to read the earth like a diary. It writes back in silence, in water stains, in temperature shifts, and you've learned to listen. You remember a story someone once told you about a settler family whose entire home was a sod dugout for over 5 years. They kept adding to it. First a lean-to, then a storage pit, then a root cellar, until eventually it was more complex than any wooden cabin. But when they finally moved out into a new house, they didn't destroy the dugout. They preserved it, used it to store preserves, called it the first house. It became part of the family lore, a monument to where they started. You look around and wonder if this place will ever be that for you. Maybe someday, if you finish your cabin, if you manage to survive another season, if you build a life instead of just enduring one, maybe then you'll keep this dugout as a reminder, as proof. For now, though, you just need it to hold a little longer, just until the cabin's roof goes up, just until the walls are sealed, just until the world stops being a wet, muddy war zone and remembers how to be a home again. You roll over, listening to the frogs begin their nightly song from some puddle not far away, the first real choir of the thaw, and you whisper to no one, almost there. You wake to birdsong, real, full-throated, unapologetically loud birdsong. Not the cautious chirp of some lonely winter sparrow, but a raucous early morning symphony that fills the valley like a welcome home banner stretched across the sky. It jerks you out of sleep before your eyes are even open, and for a few seconds, you just lie there in your dugout, disoriented, wondering why the world suddenly has so much life in it again. Then you remember. Spring's here, or at least close enough to pretend. You throw back the blanket, stretch until your joints pop like kindling, and crawl out into the open air. And the scene that greets you? It's almost rude in how beautiful it is. The world has turned green overnight. Not all the way. There are still patches of stubborn snow clinging to the shady side of hills. But the grass has made its return like a revolution. Pale green shoots poke through the mud, and every tree in the distance has begun that early fuzz of leaves, soft and shimmering like nature's 5 o'clock shadow. The creek you hadn't heard for months is suddenly alive again, trickling confidently like it knows exactly where it's going. There's a freshness in the air now that no longer smells like survival, it smells like opportunity. You walk to the edge of your half-built cabin and rest your hand on one of the logs. It's warm from the sun. Not just not cold, but warm. That changes something deep in your bones. For months you've lived in a world of negation. Not freezing, not starving, not dead. But now, finally, you're entering a world of positive presence. Warmth, light, sound, movement. And with that shift comes the final realization. It's time to leave the dugout. Not burn it down. Not abandon it like a battlefield. But step out of it. Step beyond it. You've spent weeks, months, shaping your existence inside that pocket of earth. It was a refuge, a tomb, a teacher, but it's done its job. You walk back to the entrance and duck inside one last time. The space greets you like an old friend. Quiet, heavy, familiar. The air is thick with smoke memory and wet clay, and your carvings are still visible on the back wall, though faded now with moisture and time. You sit cross-legged in the middle of the room and just breathe. Not in a rush, not counting seconds, just breathing, the way a person breathes when they know they've survived something they shouldn't have. And then you begin to pack. There isn't much. A blanket, some tools, the last scraps of preserved food, a few strips of canvas and the tin cup you've used more than your own hands. You load them into a sack you stitch together from tarp and twine, and you sling it over your shoulder. Then you pause. You walk over to the sketch wall and with a charcoal stick you fish from under a rock. You write 3 final words beneath the fading lines. I made it. You don't sign your name. You don't need to. The walls know who you are. The earth remembers. You step outside for the last time and glance back once. Not for drama, not for closure, just acknowledgement. The dugout still looks solid, stoic, half swallowed by the hillside like it always has been. If someone were walking by on the trail, they'd never know it was there. And maybe that's the point. These underground shelters, these temporary wombs carved from desperation and mud, they were never meant to be monuments. They were meant to pass you through, to hold you steady in the liminal space between suffering and survival. And when they've done their job, you don't owe them destruction. You owe them respect. You spend the next few days building in earnest. The cabin frame rises faster now. Your hands sure, the air mild, the mud drying underfoot. Each new log is a victory. Each nailed beam feels like rewriting your own story. You fashion windows from scrap and stretch oiled cloth across them for now. The roof is just a slope of overlapping boards and sod. Ugly, but effective. A real door, crafted from salvaged planks and reinforced with wire, swings on makeshift hinges. When it clicks shut for the first time, the sound echoes like a gunshot across your piece of the prairie. You sleep in the cabin that night. It's not finished, not even close. The roof leaks. The walls breathe cold. But still, you sleep with the stars directly above your bed now, not filtered through a chimney shaft. You hear frogs croaking, coyotes in the distance, and the wind, still a threat but now a familiar one, brushes past your walls instead of breathing down your neck. There's a moment just before sleep when your hand drifts across the smooth edge of the timber you laid earlier that day. You feel the grain, the warmth, the small splinters your skin has come to recognize like braille. And you think about that first day, deep in the storm, when you dug into the earth with shaking hands, convinced you wouldn't survive. But you did. And not just because of luck or grit or the handful of jerky you rationed like gold. You survived because you built, because you listened to the land, adapted, dug down when the world screamed go home, because you learned that the ground can be more than a grave. It can be shelter sanctuary, strategy. And in doing so, you joined a lineage that stretches back centuries, settlers, tribes, outcasts, wanderers, who all turned to the earth and said, "Protect me." And it did. At least long enough to help them move on. The next morning, you walk to the top of the nearest ridge and look out. The horizon is endless. Rolling hills, creeks, distant smoke trails that mean neighbours. Somewhere you're not alone. Not anymore. The dugout is behind you now. Literally, figuratively, spiritually. But if you ever need it, if the world collapses again, if the weather turns dark, if you find yourself once more without shelter or certainty, you know exactly where it is. Waiting in the earth, steady, cold, patient. Like all good things that saved your life once and will again, if asked kindly. You don't go back to the dugout for weeks. The cabin consumes your every waking moment. Patching, sealing, drying, adjusting. You spend your days in motion, and your nights half awake, startled by the creaks and groans of a structure still settling into itself. It's strange how loud a real house can be after months of sleeping underground. You have to remind yourself that creaking walls aren't signs of collapse. They're just wood remembering how to breathe. Spring deepens. The birds don't stop singing now. The grass thickens, blankets the hills in green, and flowers you never planted bloom beside your newly cut path to the creek. You even spot a deer at dawn, nosing around the edge of your plot, pausing to stare at you like it's surprised you made it. You're surprised too some days. The body mends quickly, scrapes, scabs, cracked fingernails, all fading with each warmer morning. The mind takes longer. You catch yourself crouching now and then, shoulders tense, waiting for some invisible threat. Sometimes you wake thinking you're still inside the dugout, fumbling for the soot-dark chimney or bracing for the drip of meltwater. But those moments pass. You open your eyes. Sunlight pours in from real windows. Not perfect light, not safe light, but honest, and it's enough. One afternoon, after clearing the last of your firewood from the overhang, you decide to visit. Not out of nostalgia exactly. More like curiosity, like checking in on a past version of yourself. The entrance is nearly hidden now. Grass has begun to grow up over the slope. The tarp is gone, blown off or buried, and the tunnel has partially caved in. You crouch low, brush dirt aside and peer inside. It's musty, dark, and cool. The air still carries that memory of smoke and sweat and clay. You don't go all the way in. Just sit at the entrance and look. The sketch wall's mostly faded. Your final message, "I made it," is just barely visible. Ghost letters pressed into the mud. You don't touch it. You let it be. You think of all the other shelters like this dotted across the country, buried and forgotten. Some still intact. Others long collapsed. The ones no one will ever find, and the ones some archaeologist 100 years from now might stumble into, scratching their head at how anyone lived like this. And you kind of hope they do. Not for recognition, not for credit. But just so someone else might understand that this place, this method, this way of survival, was real, was smart, was part of what got people through. You stand, brush off your knees and walk back to the cabin slowly. The sun's low, bleeding amber across the prairie. In the doorway, you pause, hand on the frame you built with your own calloused fingers, and you feel something loosen inside you. This isn't the end of hardship. The frontier will keep testing you. There'll be more storms, more hunger, more decisions you have to make with no one around to say if they're right. But you're not the same person who dug into the hillside with frostbitten hands, desperate for shelter. You've learned something deeper than survival. You've learned resilience. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that makes speeches or flexes in front of mirrors. The quiet kind. The kind that listens to the land, that bends but doesn't break, that digs, builds, rests and rises again. And on some level, you understand now, everyone who ever lasted out here had to go underground first. Literally, metaphorically, they had to get low, get quiet. Let the earth hold them while they figured out who they were. The dugout wasn't just a place you escaped to, it was a place you emerged from. The wind rises again, gentler now, moving through the grass like a tide. You step into your new home, light the fire, and close the door behind you, not with fear, but with a sense of peace. The prairie has changed, and so have you.